What's that?
Well, hello, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers. I'm your host, David the Skeptic, and I don't have much of a voice today for some reason. I am joined by my co-host, David Russell. How you doing, David? Excellent. And I'm
What's
joined
up, buddy?
by the usual suspects.
I am not a cat or whatever that thing
You're
is.
clearly not a cat. Teddy has discovered Zoom filters, and so and I
How do I get rid of this? I'm just like that lawyer, and that lawyer was from Texas. How do I get rid of this?
I'm just not going to tell you. We have Teddy, obviously. We have Andrew. How you doing, Andrew? Okay.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing? And we've
Sorry,
got Darren. How you doing, Darren?
That mute button, man.
Pretty
It's
good.
that stupid button.
Okay.
And you
I'm
work in
just gonna-
tech, right, Andrew?
We might get some appearance of Matthew at some point in this show. I think he said that he wasn't going to be able to make it today, though, now that I think about it. But if he does, he'll pop in and say howdy. At any rate, we're going to go with what we have right now. We're going to complete our discussion that we started last week. I like the 3D glasses.
How do I get rid of it? I'm just like, I'm not a cat dude lawyer.
Just see what you do, Teddy. Okay, hold on. Let me tech support Teddy out of her. Frankly, Teddy, I don't want you to get rid of it.
I'm here live.
I want you to keep it. But if you scroll up to the top of the video list, those options, the very first one is none.
I pressed that.
It didn't.
So, and so, yeah.
Oh, background filters.
It's going to be like this.
None. I
Click on the video in the filters thing and click on none. It's the top one.
Yeah, I'm clicking, but that's on virtual background. Oh, wait a minute, the video
Right.
filter thing.
Yeah. Mhm. There you go. Okay, so we like.
Oh, there we go.
I don't know why this guy. I can't do this, people. We're going to continue our discussion from last week. We're going to soldier on. We've got actually we saved some of the more important topics for this week. Some of the topics that we discussed last week, we only touched on, and I'm going to come back and take a second pass at them. I want to start with an icebreaker from last week's conversation. How would you describe your relationship with technology? And I enhance that. How would you describe most people's relationship with technology? The choices that I've given the panel are hostile toward technology. They have an uneasy truce with technology. You can take it or leave it. They're technology friendly. They love it, or it is that it is a vital part of their life. And so, Teddy, it seems appropriate to start with you. What is your relationship with technology?
Well, and it seems appropriate that I should disagree with all of those choices and have my own, which is mixed bag. And that is that I love technology when I can get it to work without having to spend too much time figuring it out. And I detest it when I can't quite get it to work. So.
That sounds more like a you problem.
It is a me problem, but it's my relationship with technology that you were asking about. So,
so how do you think that other people relate to technology? What's your impression of that?
I think that the real techie people, just love it and have no reservations about their love for it. But then, regular folks like me, when it works, it's great.
So you think of yourself as a regular folks?
I do.
I would disagree. Why would I disagree? In part because you're on a podcast, and most people simply wouldn't do it.
Geek is better than nerd, right? Geek, nerd,
No.
kook.
No, the fact that you even think that there's a difference and you're ruminating over what the difference might be suggests you are not regular people. Stop it. Darren, what's your relationship with technology?
It's a vital part of my life. And I think technology is a vital part of everyone's life. Cars, houses, grass, food. They may not realize it, and they may have problems with it, but it's a vital part of everyone's life.
Unless they're smoking grass, I don't think that grass is technology.
Well, actually, it is because of the strains that people produce. Everything's technology these days.
We're gonna have to run that by the committee. Andrew, your relationship with technology? Your relationship with mute buttons?
Mute. Can you not hear me?
I got you now.
Okay. All right. So absolutely essential part of my life. And yet there are things about technology that I have a real problem with. I'm also a technology creator. And I think that technology has a whole range of issues. But like Darren said, whether we like it or not, technology is an essential part of our lives. From new strains of marijuana to pacemakers. We can't get, I'm not sure that runs the whole continuum, by the way. That may have said more about me than technology. But I don't think that we can get away any longer from the fact that technology is not a niche thing. It is something that we all rely on, even when we don't realize it.
Right. So even though I didn't correct Darren on this, the intent of the second question was, how do you think other people would answer? How do you think most people would answer that, their relationship with technology? So I grant that everybody needs it as a vital part of their life, whether they know it or not. But how do you think they relate to technology? Okay. We will just swing back to Darren. Darren, now that I've clarified, how do you think that other people relate to technology?
Well, if Teddy's experience with the filters and Andrew's experience with the mute button is any indication, not well.
There's actually a bug in Zoom. I'll tell you what's going on with the mute button.
Yeah, we don't need excuses.
Yeah, that's
We can make fun of you because you're having
there are
problems with the mute
bugs in
button.
Zoom. I'm just gonna say.
If you swipe all the way to the right, it brings up a driving mode screen. And that button, even though it pretends to put you on and take you off of mute, doesn't actually work. So there is a bug on that screen. On the regular video screen, the mic button works exactly as it should. So I've been tinkering with this, and so there is actually a bug there.
Yeah. So go ahead, Andrew. You can answer the second part of that question.
Oh, sure.
There's a reason I ask it, so go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So I think that probably there are two dimensions that would help define where someone falls in terms of their relationship to technology: education and age. And if we could organize those axes correctly, I think we'd be able to place most people in relation to the technology that they use and how they feel about it. So it would work very much like this: how much of their technology have they been educated about, and how many years of exposure have they been able to have to the technology as it was developing. And so I think there's a range of responses to technology, and I think most people would fall roughly into groups around their own education and age. And I'll leave it there. It's not quite a direct answer, but I think it's the best I can do because there's a whole range of issues and people and how they relate to technology.
Okay, Russell, let's see if you can answer the question in the spirit it was asked. What's your relationship to it, and what do you think most people would say that their relationship to it is?
Well, hey, first off, great show last week. Sorry I missed it, but it was interesting to hear David Johnson promote objective truth, Teddi deny objective truth, and Andrew actually felt the spirit. So that was really interesting overall, guys.
I feel like that you
yeah.
heard a different show. It's Skeptics and Seekers.
No, not
Squarespace.
I heard you. Yeah, no, I heard it.
I believed in objective.
But okay,
The
so
spirit just messing with you, man, because I no longer feel the spirit, and I'm still an atheist.
well,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Russell.
well,
Sorry to cut you
it
off
comes
there.
and goes for you, Andrew. We know that. The only consistent one there was Darren the entire time. But let's yeah, so I have to agree with Darren and Andrew. It is a vital part of our life. Like when I first heard you ask the question, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm friendly to it. I don't put much stock here and there, but then when you think about it, you drive your cars, you mow your lawn, you do anything, you have your technology with you or some sort of technology, whether it's primitive in its construction or whether it's advanced in its construction. So technology is a vital part of our lives ever since we were able to make tools, so yeah, I'd have to say it's vital. And I think how people approach it is a big determining factor in how they see it. But I think it would apply to them, even if it unbeknownst to them, it's a vital part of their lives too.
Yeah. Okay. So my thought on it is obviously technology is a vital part of my life. I don't do what I do. I don't make a living without it, quite frankly. So there's nothing about me that would be me without tech. Also, I have a microphone with red lights. Check that, people. Anyway, and also that kind of tells you what kind of nerd I am. Points to anybody who can identify this mic simply from the top of it. I bet that there are some people in the audience who could do that. I won't bother to tell you what it is. Look it up. As far as other people, I think that other people think that they don't have much of a relationship with technology. The things that we think of as technology, computer related, I think that they think that they have an uneasy truce with it. They understand it's necessary, but they're not willing to do what it takes to really master it. And so I do think that kind of falls in the uneasy truce category. But I think that one of the things that separates us from lower animals is our willing to augment ourselves and our lives and our behaviors with tools. We are tool making, tool using creatures. And so even the people who are not, who think that they are not into tech are into the tech of their time, even if it's not the tech of our time. They are tool making, tool using fools. Every one of them. I don't know a single woman, and I know a lot of old ladies who wants to go back to hand churning butter. I don't know a single one who wants to do that. They would rather use the technology and buy butter that's already done. Most people don't want to make or mend their own clothes these days. There's some who can do it because they're really, really good at it. And I hate to see that art being lost, but fewer and fewer people actually want to do it. Most people, given the choice of making their own or taking some money and burning it at a clothing store, would rather do that. We use technology to augment ourselves all the time. Is one of the things that separates us from other animals. As I said, and other animals seem to be perfectly content with using whatever it is God gave them and living their life that way. And we humans are not. We are always pushing forward. We don't recognize limits. And when we run into a limit, we do our best to make a tool and smash through the limit. So that's what technology does for us. And that's kind of how I view it in the main. So I ask about how you think other people see technology. The reason is because I thought that we might have a little bit of conversation on how we fix it. But none of you, well, most of you did not cooperate except for Teddy, who answered the question the way I intended for it to be answered. And
You should
I
just
think
answer for all of us.
If I had known you were going to answer the question so badly, I would have just given you your answers in the notes. The thing is, I think there is a disparity between the people who understand the power and function of modern technology and people who don't. And what I kind of was curious about is how do we bridge that gap? What do we do to kind of bring people along who aren't where we are? And I'm not suggesting that everyone should be where we are. We're nerds on the internet doing a video podcast. Everyone doesn't have to be doing that. In fact, I hope everyone doesn't do that. But I think that a lot of people are missing out on what modern technology can bring, and some of it is because they just don't understand its benefits. So what should we do about that? Should we just push ahead and tell people to lead, follow, or get out of the way and leave them behind? Or should we offer a way to bring them on board? Is there any responsibility for people like us to people like them? Go.
I don't think so. I think we let people do what they want. If they want to jump on board with the technology, then they jump on board. If they don't, let them be free. Let them do what they want to do. I mean, they're going to have to come to terms with it at some point. I mean, whether they're laying in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, or getting tests done, trying to make a phone call from a cell phone, at some point they're going to have to scratch the surface.
I agree with all of that until you get to people that are trying to legislate technology.
Yeah.
Once you get to people that are legislating it, then I think they need to have a firm understanding of what exactly it is they're doing.
I think we are offering plenty of opportunities for people to onboard with technology. Every high school kid that lives in a family of older adults that poo-poos technology is, trying to show their family members, exactly what good it is and how much fun they have with it and that sort of thing. And I realize everyone is probably an overclaim, but the point is that I think there are plenty of opportunities to onboard with technology, and the rest of it is a personal decision. You can't make people see advantages. That's slightly different from the question of, is there some level of technology that we should make universally available? Is there an economic cost to technology that some people can't pay? That kind of thing. But in terms of onboarding with technology, I think technology companies are doing a fine job of trying to help people get on board with technology, to use it successfully, et cetera. But you can't make all people follow the same path.
Teddy?
Yeah, I also think that, people ought to do just what they want to do and what they think is best for themselves and their families. It's not as if technology isn't without its downside. And, we see, for example, they talk about how when children get over a certain amount of hours of screen time, how it might affect their brains and different things. And, a lot of times kids are, I know my generation, we watched a lot of television, but there's something different with sometimes all the video games, just all of the quick action going on, and then perhaps that might make it difficult for some people when they are doing a task that is not so stimulating in terms of having lots of stuff flashing in front of their eyes, that sort of thing. So, I think it's got its benefits and its detriments. They say that with the military, that all of that video game playing actually has helped out really well in terms of, I guess, hand-eye coordination. So, it's a mixed bag, but if people don't think that that's right, like I'm sure Amish folks are obviously not on the technology train. And
That's because they're hypocrites. They are on the technology train. They've just chosen their century for technology.
well, that's true. That's true. But in terms of just modern technology, but so it's got its benefits and its detriments, and I think people should be allowed to choose what they want to do. But now that I'm thinking about it, there becomes a question as to what about parents? Like, let's take the Amish, and if they withhold technology from their children, is that a type of child abuse almost? Because are they setting their child up to fail if their child should ever choose to leave that community? So
Yes.
I don't know, at what point does the government have I don't know, a duty, a right? That's a tough one. Ooh.
Well, so let me jump in and disagree with almost all of you. Again, I've got a feeling that that's going to be the pattern. So that's fine. I don't mind being in the hot seat. I'm wearing my asbestos sweatpants, so I'm okay. I do think that we have a responsibility. I think society has a responsibility in the same way that we have a responsibility to teach people basic math, to teach people reading skills, um, to teach people some basic history, whether they think they need it or not. We have a responsibility as a society to bring people along with us. And so we do that in the form of public education. And the core curriculum and standardization and things like that. We are trying to set a basic standard of education that we don't want a person to fall below. And yes, at a certain age, you can allow people to opt out of school, but we do everything that we can to make sure that information is available. I believe that technology is in that same category of education. People who don't understand the benefits of technology, at the very least, need the opportunity to have the education. I think that schools from maybe the fourth grade on need to have a curriculum that involves common technology. This is how to use a smartphone. These are apps that you would use on a computer. This is an email attachment. You should not open this. Let me teach you about spam and malware and how to protect yourself. These are things that should be taught along with the arithmetic table. And so, I think that there's a responsibility societally. I think there's a responsibility for each of us geeks because we have families, and we all have some family member who is not very technologically literate. And it's not up to us to force them to use technology, but if we see them struggling with something and we know of a technology that can help them, we should tell them about it. If they get interested and buy a smartphone, we should help them learn how to use it. We do a lot of things on the internet. I remember one of the things that Andrew did when we got onto the Unbelievable boards. It seems like forever ago now. is explain to people how to format their posts so that they would have bolding and headings and number lists and things like that. And that was a big help for people. So even people who had a certain level of technology, they didn't know how to make a good looking post. And so that was made available. I think that we do, those of us who have a responsibility to share. And it's not just a matter of, well, I got mine, and if they're too stupid to get theirs, then too bad. So I do think that there are things that we can do without forcing people to do something that they absolutely don't want to do. But once again, it's at the very least at the education level of young people today, it should be offered in school along with everything else that we offer in school. It should be a part of the core curriculum because it's a part of the core life experience.
I am, David, in terms of what you're saying, I actually agree with a lot of what you're saying, probably all of it. Oh gosh.
And look, we had a very strong agreement fest
people.
last week. I don't want that to continue this week.
Hell has frozen over. Okay, so because I think that parents are to be given a lot of leeway in terms of how they raise their children. And I believe in religious liberty and all of that. But, again, the state, the government has a certain duty to protect children. And so what if somebody's parents think that, I don't want my child educated, or my religion says that, I can beat my child within an inch of his or her life. There are limits to
like
everything.
a slave.
Eved, servant.
Sorry.
By the way, it's so funny. I told some friends about that, and so now they say to me, my Eved to me. So anyway, but
Matthew.
Sorry,
Thank
guys.
Hello,
Humble
my
apologies.
friend.
I do apologize.
No apology necessary. We're so happy to see you.
Great.
Digging the shades, dudes.
Thank you. This is technology at work. It's allowing me to do a video podcast without using an eye patch, and I can still hide my eyes, which I will continue to do as long as I can get away with it.
All you need is a hat for the full-on Blues Brothers look.
I'm working on it.
Hey, there was that hat with the hamburger thing.
Right. That is exactly the thought I had too. And I thought, no, I'm not going to be a hamburger.
Well, it was kind of like a fedora, but it was like a fedora. So
yeah.
So
I'm going to give it back to you, Teddy, but I just want to catch Matt up very quickly. We had asked the first question on the list, which is what your relationship with technology is. And everyone, almost everyone went off on their own answer and did not select the choices. And then they went on to misunderstand the second question and answered it their way instead of my way. And so this has already gone badly for me. But the idea of the second question is just that you are telling us how you think most people would answer that question, what their relationship to technology would be. And and so to summarize the rest of the conversation, I felt like if those of us who are very technically capable will call us the haves, and those who are not technically capable will call them the have-nots, even if they don't understand the benefits of technology, do we have any responsibility to help them, or do we just leave them behind? And so most of the other panelists coldly said they can do what they want to, and if they don't get on the train, they missed it. And I said, I gave a more socialist answer and said, no, we should teach them. We should make it a part of school curriculum. We should, do our part individually to help our family members and friends who, can benefit with technology. And so I do think that we have some kind of responsibility. And so Teddy and I are
a socialist answer. That was just a wise answer.
Teddy and I are in strong agreement and having trouble coming to terms with it. So Teddy, as you wrap up your answer, I want to see how Matt responds to this, because he brings a perspective that none of us has. He comes from a socialist country.
Hey! We are not socialist here in Limeyland.
Go ahead, Teddy. You can finish your thought.
Yeah, I was just, there's the question of at what point does the government have an interest in ensuring that children are equipped to succeed as adults and to be able to support themselves and to not necessarily be forced to, for example, if a child grows up in an Amish community with Amish parents, and if they want to keep technology away from the child, or let's just say they say, or just any religious group or just any group says that, we don't want our child to have any education. Does the government have an interest in protecting that child in the same way that we protect children from physical abuse or sexual abuse? The right to an education is a core feature of somebody's ability to most of the time to succeed and to have potential in front of them in terms of choosing to have the job that makes them happy and is fulfilling, as opposed to something that is where just anybody can flip a burger and being forced into that. It's one thing if somebody's young and they do that, or it's another thing if somebody's older and that's what they want to do, but to have no other options. I mean, there's I think
to have no option
certain
is to be
societal-
forced.
Yes.
That is the
and
very.
so it's like, I agree.
Yeah.
Ooh, God.
So from our socialists on the panel, what do you? I don't know what your political system is. Come on. Not exactly capitalism.
They're not American.
What's going on over there? What do you think, Matthew?
Well, technology is vital. You can't function in society nowadays if you don't have some kind of appreciation or familiarity with technology. It's, I imagine that 100 years ago, people were having this same conversation about cars. And now cars, we just take them for granted. Transportation, whether you're driving your own car, whether you take a taxi, or whether you take a bus, it is absolutely integral to the fabric of society now. Whereas I'm sure 100 years ago, if we told them that was going to happen, people would be up in arms about it, saying socialism. And technology is just that thing. In 100 years from now, people will be baffled that we ever even had this conversation. Life changes, the things that we use changes, and technology is just one of those things. And it is essential that people growing up are given the opportunity to become familiar with it. When you and I were young children, David, the technology, the computers and things that we had access to are very different to what we have now. I predict that we've got a generation of children growing up who their technology is solely down to smartphones. The idea of having a laptop or a desktop PC is probably completely alien to them. They may even never own one in their entire life. All of their technology usage will be done through their smartphone. And that's something that we didn't imagine probably even 10 years ago. So technology changes and we just need to deal with it. So whether you love it or whether you think it's a vital part of your life is probably irrelevant. You're going to have to deal with it because it's going to be there as part of life.
So I'm going to keep a promise that I made. I know that some of you guys might have some other follow-up. If either one of you, Darren, Andrew, or Russell, have one last piece of follow-up, the mic goes to the first person who grabs it, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you said about technology. But I don't think we need to do the basics of, teach them how to use email. I think kids are going to pick that up if they have an interest in it and if they want to. But I do agree that teaching people to use it responsibly, like malware and viruses uh, and misinformation, all that critical thinking, that definitely needs to be added to our curriculum at school.
Oh, I mean, it may be like sex education. Um, People are going to figure out how to do it, whether you give them sex education or not. But that doesn't mean that sex education doesn't have its place. And I pretty sure that my wife wishes that there was a more useful sex education when I was in school, because there's doing it and then there's doing it well. So no one ever talks about that. We're going to do a sex show at some point, and this will come up.
Will there be
Anybody
cakes?
who wants to be on the sex show, this is going to probably happen in April. I'll just tell you that right now. Anybody who wants to talk sex on SNS, start raising your hand in the comments now. That will probably be 2 to 3 weeks worth of conversation. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about all of the different aspects of it. And there will be no blushing on that show. So
What glasses are you going to wear for that show?
you'll see.
I'm gonna have a little bubble pipe too, the Hefner bubble pipe. But
So-
yeah, I agree with a lot of what everybody said. I think Thanos says it best when he says, "I am inevitable." I think technology is inevitable. I think that it being taught in schools is, yeah, I mean, it has to be. Just with my own kids, I mean, they're learning. I have one of my kids are in cybersecurity classes, and he's a freshman in high school. So yeah, I mean, it's inevitable. I think that you can't force the older generations or isolated segments of society, such as the Amish or those guys that kill people that come to their own. I don't know their name, but yeah, I mean, you can't force it, but if you want to be part of society, you're gonna have to learn it.
Okay. So yeah, making it available and forcing it are two very different things. And I'm against forcing it on older people, but I am in favor of making it available to older people and also making it a requirement for younger people in schools, part of curriculum. And I think that's even different than forcing it too. But if you disagree with me, say so in the comments. Skeptics and Seekers.squarespace.com. And so before we move on to a more, that was actually supposed to be the casual part of the show, a more serious conversation, I do want to mention next week's show because I know that I will forget before the show is over. Next week's show is going to be myself and David Russell, mano y mano, to walk in. Two will walk out too. Don't worry about it. And we will be talking about the hiddenness of God. I will be posting that blog post early. In fact, I'll probably have it posted by the time you hear this podcast. So look on the site for that, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. You can email me directly at skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. You can begin to start making your comments on the hiddenness of God. The post is about 3,000 words or so. So you'll have plenty of time to read it before we do the show next week. So that's going to be fun. Let's get into the serious part of our discussion. And as a was that? Okay. As a promise to Teddi, I'm going to jump straight to some First Amendment discussion that we touched on last week a little bit, but I think that that more needs to be said. So we do have a First Amendment kind of issue in our country right now. And even though I don't think it's a First Amendment problem, a lot of people do. And technology is at the heart of that. And so before jumping directly into the First Amendment problem, I just want a yes or no from the panelists. This is a monosyllabic answer. Yes or no. There's no maybe, there's no gray area, there's no speech. All right. So the question is, do you think big tech has too much power? Yes or no? I am going to start off no.
Yes.
No. No.
Yes and no.
Wrong. Oh God. How do I put a
don't
big
have a
X on
yes
that
or no.
square? Is that possible?
That was-
Darren beat me to it. I was going to say the same thing.
It's not properly a binary answer.
These are exactly the answers I expected. By the way, this is
Okay,
exactly
Nichols,
what I
Andrew.
expected. Okay, Andrew, you are not happy with yes or no. I know this because you are not happy with yes or no on pretty much any question. Therefore, what is some of the nuance that this question needs? Does big tech have too much power?
Well, okay. So when we ask that question today, I think I'm not necessarily accusing you of this. I think this is a problem in the media. When we ask that question right now, we sort of understand the question to actually be, do social media companies, which are technology companies, have too much power? That is a different question from whether technology companies have too much power.
It's also a different question than
so
what I
I-
intend, because I am thinking about all of technology, things like Apple's App Store, for instance, the walled garden,
Right.
things like Chromebooks and Google's ability to make any updates push automatically, things like all of technology. So the complaint is
and so
not
that's
just
the
about
problem.
social media.
Right. Well, but see, that's the problem. Technology is not a homogeneous question. So, if I said, does GM have too much power in regard to how it refines its engines? That would be a very different question than does Apple's walled garden. Does Apple have too much power because it has the walled garden and the kind of control over it that it has?
Okay. The reason I think it is the same question, and the place where my mind is that these tech companies are autonomous, and they can make huge decisions that affect an enormous number of people. It doesn't matter what the decision is or what the topic is. The fact that they have the power, that one company has the off switch to, certain percentage of phones, 50% of the smartphones in America, that's a lot of power.
Right, but the
And it
reason
doesn't
I
matter
dis-
what they do with it. It doesn't matter whether they ever do anything bad with it. You can still address whether that's too much power. And GM may be in the same position. They may have too much power when it comes to things like engines.
Well, the reason I disagree with you, and the reason I say that it is not homogeneous, is because it's not the same kind of technology and they're not regulated the same. And so if it were a homogeneous environment where the technologies were close enough to similar that they were all regulated the same, I think we'd have a different kind of conversation. But in order to evaluate whether a company has too much power, as you put it, I think we not only have to question what the company is, what it produces, what the market is, but how it's regulated. And there's too much diversity along that landscape and too many dimensions to me to say, yes, it's homogeneous and give a yes or no answer.
Right. And I think that while that is true, the question is about big tech, and big tech tends to be more about the big five, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook.
I think that's what the conversation is. I don't think
that's what the question is.
This is what I said, is that we're going to end up confusing social media companies with all of tech. And it's but
those aren't all social media companies,
take the
Andrew.
conversation that way, but It's not a trap I'll fall into.
Right, but it's not. Those aren't all social media companies, Andrew. Those are just the biggest tech companies that
No kidding.
are the target of the thing that people call big tech today.
Right. Thank you. That's exactly my point. And so they're not all the same, and we shouldn't lump them together as if they are.
Okay, Darren, you had a non-binary answer. How did you want to spool that out?
Um, well, I share a lot of the concerns that Andrew had with the question, but I think if we're talking about that, I think when you say big tech, you mean technology that has a very has a web of integration into society, so that if it disappears one day, then society really has a big issue. Is that?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, that's true. But it's what I specifically mean by big tech is what the media means and what politicians mean when they say big tech. And I think that is a little bit more specific. They're not talking about companies that produce pencils. So that's, I think that you can get a little bit too pedantic and miss the question.
Right, but are we including like PGE in that big tech?
Are we including what? I'm sorry?
PGE, electricity companies?
They're not part of the big tech discussion. I understand that they are a big part of life, and we would call them a utility that's not under the umbrella of big tech. So let me say again, what most people mean when they say big tech, they're talking about what many would call the big five: Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, because together they control just about every aspect of computing. You could throw in other players like Samsung and Qualcomm. I think that would probably be fair, but that's what most people mean, and that's what I mean.
Yeah, and if that's all you mean, then no, I don't think they do. Just because Facebook is considered part of your five. Am I remembering that list
Yes.
correctly?
Yes.
So I
And
walked away
they're
from
not my
Facebook.
five, by the way. They're, you can.
Well, I live in the tech world, so I'm going off of your list because that's
right.
what the
It's a very
conversation is.
common list, right? They once again they're often called the big five. If you were talking about the Bible and you said the 12, people would know what you were talking about. You say the five, people tend to know what you're talking about in tech. So once again, I recognize that there are other companies in tech. There are car companies and battery companies and so forth, but that's not what people mean.
Well,
Yeah, and
but that's part of the problem, though. The fact that people don't understand what large tech companies are. And so the fact that they only associate large tech with these five companies is not a way to narrow the conversation. In fact, it's sort of wholly the wrong way to narrow the conversation. And that's what I was driving at. So the food you eat is part of big tech. Now, we should actually have the Monsanto conversation at some point. Is GMO the bad thing that some people think, or is it not? But that sort of artificial limiting is really just about people being unaware of how deeply and what kinds of technologies penetrate their lives.
Right. And so once again, fairly narrow. I think I've been pretty clear about the scope of the tech that we're talking about. Russell, you've got facial expressions. Do you have any words behind them?
Not much, but I do agree with Andrew. And I was just going to say, I don't even know if it's related now, but I was just to say, I think the biggest worry for me is when technology falls in the wrong hands, but that's kind of a separate issue. But I think Andrew, if he has a way to narrow down the conversation, that would be great.
Well, I did narrow it down.
Use- Look,
I'll narrow it down again if you like.
Look, I'm happy to use whatever narrowing the group agrees to, but my point is that whatever narrowing we use in order to further the conversation, we are narrowing it specifically so that we can answer a question, yes or no, when it's applied to big tech in general. Is not a yes. Is not
But
a
I
yes
did narrow
question,
it several times. I'll be glad to narrow it again.
at the beginning. Well, you didn't actually at the beginning.
Well, no, I did.
that
And
was-
once
that's
again, I'll be
wrong.
glad to narrow it again. It's the same group of technology companies that repeatedly are in front of congressional committees that
But
are.
that was not the
See,
beginning.
Teddy knows exactly who I'm talking about and what I'm talking about. This is a
David, it's not like
cultural
everybody doesn't
term.
know who you're talking about. That wasn't the beginning of the question. As I said, we're all happy to use a narrowed list. The list wasn't narrowed.
But no one seems to be happy using the narrowed list that I've given.
I'm happy
You
using
keep
the narrowed
complaining that big tech is bigger than that, and this conversation isn't. Matthew, do you at least
And you
know?
sort of narrowed
Do
it
you
up
know what
again.
I'm talking about when I talk about big tech?
Yes, I do. But only because you're using what the public view as big tech. You know, like
Right.
Darren, I work in technology. So for me, there's companies that the public don't know about, which I think belong in the big fish pond. You know, companies like Oracle.
Right. I'm a freelance writer, as everyone knows by now, and my beat is technology, and I deal with a lot of enterprise IT. And so I write about a lot of things that I don't especially care about, but that I recognize as huge technologies. But when I talk about big tech, I am speaking in a socio-political, cultural sense, and to fail to understand that is to miss the question.
Yes, that's true. But the companies on that list change. You know, when I first started using computers, you know, Microsoft wasn't that big a fish. Apple was nowhere to be seen. You know, the big companies to look out for was Lotus 1-2-3 and WordStar. Where the hell are they now?
IBM.
You know, we've got new companies. Yeah, IBM. Absolutely. There was another fruit-based company called Apricot that made loads of computers that was probably more wealthy than Apple was at the time.
Right. And
IBM
if we were speaking in that time context, those would be the companies that we would be thinking about.
Yeah.
And so the question can be applied to other companies as long as you understand the category that I'm talking about. And it's still the same valid question, because it's the question that politicians are asking today, which is, do these companies have too much power? Should they be downsized and regulated and put under control? Not even because they've done anything illegal, but because they simply wield too much power. That because we've started this podcast by talking about how important technology is. Well, politicians understand that too. It's vitally important. And so you can try to frame laws around whether companies have done something illegal or not. But at some point, I think the conversation is, these guys are too big and they hold something that's too important, and we can't allow it to be held by a handful of companies. We simply have to regulate it. And so, whereas I don't think that technology companies have too much power, I do understand the fear. The fear of
David,
it makes perfect sense to me.
Can I jump in for a sec?
Yeah. When have you ever asked to jump in?
Well, it was sort of Matthew's turn, and I wasn't sure.
There's time for everything, guys.
Matthew's a big boy. He can he can jump in.
So I think that it's important that we make a very critical distinction between a company being really big versus a company that is engaging in anti-competitive practices, where they try to do like, the Rockefellers did, trying to squash and crush the competition. For example, we see that with Amazon, we see that with Facebook, where as soon as there is a competitor, they then will try to copy what they're doing, and then they start talking to the competitor, saying, "Oh, you kind of need to get on board with, maybe let's work together," and then there's this wink and a nod to whereas if you don't, with us or let us buy you out so we get rid of our competition, then we're just gonna crush you, or we're gonna copy what you're doing. And during the congressional hearings with the Big Five, that was one of the things that was brought up, how Facebook would kind of threaten, and they dance around it like every good person who's making a threat usually tends to do, but kind of like, do it our way or else, we're going to crush you. And Amazon, they are doing things. They have people that, other sellers that sell things through Amazon, yet Amazon's constantly undercutting them with their own products. And so there's this anti-competitiveness. And that's the real problem. It's not just that they're big, because you can be big, and just because nobody else is out there, that doesn't necessarily give the government a right to step in with regulations, saying, "Oh, well, you're so big, you need to start selling off some of your assets," or
Sure, but Teddy, isn't that the net effect of being big anyway? Because here's another David's razor to do with tech. A company that is sufficiently big enough will, by its very nature, be anti-competitive. There's simply no way that a giant company cannot be anti-competitive, or certainly not be accused of being anti-competitive, just to act. An elephant in a arena of puppies is anti-competitive when he takes a step.
And they're legally required to be anti-competitive anyways, because the people making the money have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to actually make more money.
Right. I don't think that it's possible to get to be the size of some of these companies without crossing that anti-competitive threshold. And so for me, I think it's less about whether they have done anything that's anti-competitive and enough about whether it's a public interest or not. So just giving you an example, let me just give this example real quick. Andrew, you can jump in. Wi-Fi spectrum. Who owns air? Should someone patent Wi-Fi and be able to own that? Well, I don't care if they did or technically can. They shouldn't. No one should own the air. No one should own the airwaves for television. No one should own touchscreen computing. No one. There are some things that I don't care if you innovated and made it. At some point, it's too much of a public interest for you to own it.
But if you don't let people enjoy the fruits of their labor and their innovation, then you kind of squash the incentive.
I agree, but that's where we get into patents, which I promise we will get to. So I'm just going to cut you off right there, because we are going to have a point of agreement. I'm just trying to set the extreme edge of this.
David, but who's going to own it once you take it away from the owner? I mean, who's going to own it after that point?
Government.
And you trust them?
Okay.
No.
So there's the issue on the table is, where is the proper dividing line between competition and anti-competition. So we allow big companies to grow by and large because because we think that it is good for the people that own the companies and for the people that work for them. It becomes anti-competitive, not as a result of their size necessarily, though size certainly plays a large part, because as they grow, they gain assets and that gives them leverage over smaller competitors. But the question here is not competition, it's anti-competition. When does a large controlling force use its controlling force directly to stop innovation of other companies? That's actually the problem. And just a moment on Wi-Fi. Just because signals operate over the air doesn't mean that they're not signals. And the things that produce those signals, those pieces of equipment that do that job, are just as non-trivial as the pieces of equipment that allowed us to connect wires the generation before wireless. And so we shouldn't lose track of that.
Right. I wasn't actually talking about Wi-Fi when I said it. What I was thinking about was cell phone spectrum.
Right. I understand. So I want to speak to that for a second. The reason that we regulate spectrum is because it is possible for one carrier to trample on another carrier's signal. We used to see this in the days of FM radio. And the reason that we allow carriers to buy spectrum, by the way, I don't think this is the best model, but the reason we allow carriers to buy spectrum and to use it exclusively is because if it was a free-for-all, if spectrum was completely open all the time to anybody that wanted to use it, our network simply wouldn't work. We'd have carriers stomping on each other all the time. And it would simply be a race to see who could build the tower with the greatest peak envelope power.
Right.
And so the system is not great, but we have it for a reason.
Right. I just wanted to ask you a quick question about that because I don't know the answer. The spectrum, when it's purchased, is that time limited?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't think it is. When I owned that little wireless company back in 2008, we wanted to gain funding to buy a piece of spectrum so that we didn't have to compete in the public area. There is public spectrum, is the point. But when we were reading through the rules, I didn't see anything that indicated that if you bought spectrum, it was not in perpetuity.
Yeah, I think there are some. I was just going to say, I think there are some rules along the lines that if you buy it, you have to use it, and if you don't use it, then you can lose it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. That's probably what I was thinking in terms of. So, yeah, in keeping with my socialist theme, I do think that there are some technologies that are so vital. They can either be taken over or heavily regulated. And I think that our option, the option that we choose as people as well, will regulate it. And what is a regulation if not a government takeover? Because it's the government making rules about a thing that they didn't make. They didn't make it, they don't own it, but they're gonna make rules over it anyway. Because they've decided that it is simply too much in the public interest to let a company do anything they want to with a thing they have. And I think the same would happen with an individual. Matt, if you built a time machine and your government knew about it, how long would it be before they owned the time machine? You're the only person in the world with a time machine. I don't
However
care
long it takes them
what
to
your
write
company,
a $1 billion check.
right? No, they will. They might sit. They might. And if you turn it down to hold out money, you will disappear and they will own the time machine. This is just the.
Well, they got to catch him first, David, and he'll be traveling through time. So
Yeah, I was about
But
to
you,
say
you
about that.
understand what I'm saying, though. There are some things, like, for instance, the cure for if someone came up with a cure for cancer, I'm sorry, we're going to use that. You've got a patent on that. That's great, and I think that there are some ways that we can structure patents for important things. And if we make it to the patent part of the discussion, we can. But I think there is a such thing as public interest, and the public interest becomes more important than corporate interest.
but that's the thing, though, is like, who's defining public interest, and why is their definition any better than the person that owns
Like
it?
I said, that's what a
I mean,
regulation
what are you going to
is.
steal?
The regulation is the government declaring that there's a public interest, and they therefore plant rules on a thing that they do not own, but they have decided they control.
Well, given the government's abuse over the years and taking people off their land and so forth, and declaring it public interest with eminent domain and so forth, I just don't trust them. So
I don't trust them either. I don't. So I'm with you, but I don't trust companies either. I trust companies less in this case. And so I am.
Yeah, but you know
fairly-
that company owner could be you, David.
I
And
trust me. I
I
don't
would-
trust me either. If I had a
Okay.
cure for cancer, I'm gonna stick it to the first million people who want it. And if the government wants it, they're going to have to take it, because I don't know that I would have enough public interest in my heart to do the right thing. But I hope that the government is powerful enough to do the right thing. Unfortunately, government and doing the right thing don't often go together, and so I am somewhat conflicted. But I think if you're saying, well, the government shouldn't make rules over things it doesn't own, then you're saying it shouldn't regulate things. And I think we all agree with government regulation at to some extent. And big tech is not immune to government regulation, or at least it should not be immune to government regulation. I'm surprised, almost shocked at how little regulation the government has made on technology companies. I think part of the reason is because it's a bunch of old men and women in Congress who don't understand modern tech, and they don't know what's going on. And now they're blindsided by some of the tech today. And they're like, well, we ought to make some rules, but there ought to be a law against that. Well, actually, you're probably right. There probably should be a law against that. And someone savvy enough should have done it 20 years ago.
But part of the thing is, David, is that when you're balancing out the free speech issues.
Yes, that's where we're going. So feel free to go there.
Yeah, and you got to remember that you've got the whole immunity from liability and from pretty much being sued, because they can just get summary judgment if somebody sues them for something. These like you sue Facebook for something, and before you get into proof and stuff like that, they end up saying, oh, we've got immunity from Section 230 of the U.S. Code, and it gets thrown out on summary judgment without having a full hearing. And so the thing is that normally, with the First Amendment, we're supposed to let most speech, especially political speech, leave it alone, where the state is not trying to infringe upon it. But when the state itself is letting some people have that free speech without being checked by the libel and slander laws so that people don't get defamed, because normally when somebody is the speaker of something or the writer of something, there is an important thing about truth. And of course, truth is always a defense to a defamation claim. And so that kind of holds people somewhat in check about being very careful about lying about others. Not that it doesn't happen, but at least there's a check there. But through Section 230, they've been given immunity from that. And so
let's talk
that
230. Let's talk 230 for a moment. Andrew, I'll put you and Darren together. Together, come up with a brief explainer for Section 230 that that people will understand. I hope I did not choose the wrong people, because
Darren, do you want to
I
start?
know that you guys can
Yeah.
go off on this.
It's
ahead.
actually really simple. 230 basically treats companies that host information like a utility. So you don't sue AT&T because someone is sending libelous information over their wires. And so basically it just treats people that host information like search engines and a lot of the social media companies as telephone cables rather than as people that are actually responsible for what goes over that telephone cable.
Andrew,
right.
how do you add to that?
Yeah, just one analogy potentially. So the U.S. mail service, if someone sends you unwanted advertising in the mail, by the way, it happens to me all the time. I get junk mail, and I despise it, right? But it's not in some sense, it's not the post office that is causing the problem. And as long as those advertisements are in envelopes, it's not their responsibility, right? So if we imagine a world without Section 230, and using the post office analogy, what would happen without 230 is if you made the carrier responsible for all of the content that people posted, the carrier, or in this case, somebody like Facebook or Twitter or whatever, the lockdown would become instant. You think we have something like free speech now, and we do. But if you make Facebook responsible, they have to open all your mail. Twitter has to read all your tweets. And the moment you get rid of 230, it is like making the post office responsible for opening every envelope. First of all, post office can't have enough employees to do that. Well, at least don't think they can. Seems economically unlikely. But how many of us actually would want the post office to open all of our mail? I don't think any of us would. And the truth is, I don't think we want 230 to be eliminated, because I don't think we want Twitter or Facebook making a call about everything that we say.
So before going on about whether 230 is a good or bad idea, Matthew, you live in a country that doesn't have a 230. Is there an equivalent to the Digital Millennium Act?
Probably. I wouldn't know what it is or how to quote it, but I would expect so.
Did the explainers that Darren and Andrew give make it clear to you what 230 is?
Yes, I think I understand it. Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with some of the highlights.
Okay, so
you should let
Teddi,
Darren argue with what I said, David, because he may understand 230 better than I do.
he'll have his chance. Look, when I ask you and Darren to specifically say something about something particularly nerdy, I am going to keep a very tight leash and a brick in case I need to brick you, because I know that you can get carried away.
This is the whole leash thing. Yeah, okay.
So Teddi, you brought up 230. It's also in the notes. So I wanted you to go ahead and continue it. Russell, did you have anything to add on 230? Okay. So Teddi, yeah, all of this does have to do with 230 and free speech as we're winding our way around. I personally see 230, removing 230 as a problem for free speech without at least one of my radical suggestions, which I will be happy to make again later. But so talk to me, what do you see as 230 and why do you want it repealed?
I don't want it repealed. I want there to be some amendments to it in order to be sure that the whole spirit of 230 is upheld, because when it was passed and when these platforms were given this immunity from liability and from being fully sued in terms of going through the whole process, as opposed to getting something just squashed at summary judgment, or like right at the beginning of the lawsuit saying, hey, we've got liability and throw it out. And that's it. Because they don't have to spend much money on lawyers when they can just get rid of it so quickly. The whole spirit of 230 in giving that liability was because it was seen that that it was going to be a free speech platform, and it was done to encourage free speech. And so when these platforms start controlling content, no, part of with the Communications Decency Act, which that's what 230 is all about, they do give the people that are in charge of the platform the ability, and they want them to be able to have some degree of control over what's going on in terms of on that platform. So for example, if somebody's doing something like trying to traffic humans, and actually that is not immune from liability. There are certain things like copyright infringement, human trafficking, and breaking federal laws. And those are not immune from being sued. They're not immune from being sued for those things. Everything else they are. But the thing is that, for example, they can control harassment. If somebody is harassing someone else on Facebook, that person could be banned. If somebody is engaging in certain types of hate speech, then in certain situations, it depends on
who defines hate speech and harassment.
Well, it to a certain degree, it's the people that have the platform. But here's the thing: there's a good faith requirement that they are going to give a certain set of standards, like a user agreement, and that people then will see what the user agreement is. Do they agree to it? Not that anybody reads any of that stuff, but anyway, but that it's not going to just be arbitrary.
Well, why can't it be arbitrary?
Well, because that is then going to inhibit free speech. So if you say
just one step at a time. You mentioned Facebook in particular. I actually think they are somewhat arbitrary, but never mind that. Why can't they be arbitrary from a legal perspective? You can't just wave a banner that says free speech, because that's not a law. Is there any law that says that Facebook has to be fair in their moderation?
Well, I don't, and that's actually one of the interesting things about 230 as it is right now. I don't think that technically there is anything. And so that's one of the reasons why the Republicans want to see some amendments put into it to fine tune it. But Facebook has repeatedly said that they are trying, they promote themselves as being a free
I don't care whether
platform.
I don't care about that. I don't care what they say they're doing. Let's assume that all social media companies are lying. Hell, we can talk about skeptics and seekers. We don't even need to talk about Facebook. Guess what? Skeptics and Seekers is moderated by me, Russell, Wallace, and Brian, with a Y. And you know how we moderate? However the hell we want to. That's how we moderate. Now, Now, the fact is, anyone who is on the boards and has been on for a long time knows we don't actually moderate anything. we don't actually do anything. We are the world's worst moderators, but we have the power to do it, and we could do it just because I don't like the color of your shirt. And that's not illegal. It's a dick move, but it's not illegal. I don't have to be fair.
And I don't know
Um,
actually I don't know to what extent 230 applies to smaller groups, because obviously Skeptics and Seekers isn't the size of Facebook, and it
Well,
doesn't.
it wouldn't apply to us any differently in principle. I don't.
Yeah, size doesn't matter for 230.
Yeah, because
Teddy, I posted 230 in the chat if you want to
Sorry?
read through. I posted 230 in the
Oh.
chat if you want to read it while we're talking, because you'll have better insight into the language.
I've
than any-
seen it, and they talk about, what is it, internet service providers, because there's the interactive computer service provider, and then versus an information content provider.
Right.
And it's questionable, because with Skeptics and Seekers, David obviously always puts out a big blog in his opinion.
I
So
provide content. I put some of it's news. We put a lot of news in the forums.
right.
So but the difference between Facebook and Skeptics and Seekers, well, a bunch of differences, but here's an important one. The forums that Skeptics and Seekers uses are actually a discuss technology, DISQUS, discuss. And while those boards are linked through a Squarespace widget to the bottom of David's writing, whatever blog we're talking about at the moment, David provides the blog content, but beyond that, the forums are not in any real sense provided by Skeptics and Seekers, except to the extent that they're linked to the page. But
right. So that one other
technology is provided by another company.
Right. So one other thing to add to that, though, because that's only partially true. It's true that it's not Skeptics and Seekers platform, but it is true that we set our own moderation rules through Discuss. So within the Discuss panel is our ability to set moderation. Now, there is moderation that Discuss can do that has nothing to do with us. And so Discuss, for instance, could remove a user from their system for whatever reasons that they do, and I would not be able to put them back.
Right. And they do have some moderation technology there.
Right. So,
it's pretty lightweight.
But as far as us being able to then put on top of whatever Discuss's rules are, our own sense of moderation, we can do that all day. And we do.
But so I think Teddy and Darren are both hitting on a critical problem, though. Teddy pointed out that Skeptics and Seekers is not nearly so big as Facebook. I think that's true. Darren said 230 doesn't care about size. Also true. But aren't we all asking whether 230 should care? Because there's a difference between Ranger Telecom. It's a little company in a place called Wetumpka, Alabama. You don't have to care about it. The point is, it's tiny. What Ranger Communications does with that local phone company that affects a couple thousand people is not at all like what AT&T does with a much broader set of users. Now, I'm not saying that Ranger can't do something egregious. It can. But if it does, the level of egregiousness is far different from if AT&T did something equally egregious.
But now the key thing, though, with 230 is we want to to keep liability just as low as possible, because the objective is free speech, and that is in the legislative history of 230. I mean, that's the whole point, because they know that if, for example, David, let's just ask you, if you were responsible for all of the stuff that was said on Skeptics and Seekers,
I would ban you immediately. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. I would have no choice. I would have to ban you. I would ban someone else that I like a lot. I would ban I won't. No, yes, I will. Vic Ruiz, who I like a lot, I would have to ban for some of the same reasons. I would have had to ban Tara a long time ago for content.
In terms of for legal liability, or because you don't like what we say?
No, nothing to do with what do you say. It would be completely about legal liability for things like COVID and masks and things of that nature. I might suffer some liability for things like what many on the left, including me, would call the Trump's big lie of election fraud.
That's still, well, under the Biden administration, given all the weird stuff he's trying to pass through with, well, not pass.
Well, but I'm just saying, I would have to evaluate each of those things and my liability against them. And people who said things like the kinds of things that you guys say, you wouldn't be able to say. Now you can say it today because I'm not responsible for what you say.
Which, you know, that's probably not going to be around he's probably not going to be around very long.
But do you understand? I can allow all of that because I'm not responsible for what you say. But the moment you remove 230 and I am responsible, probably half the people who comment on Skeptics and Seekers get an automatic ban because I wouldn't be able to control them.
Right. And that is the whole purpose of 230, because it wants to facilitate the exchange of ideas, because that is the best opportunity of finding truth.
But I would be liable for instance, that wrong COVID information that someone gave, anti-vax information that someone, I would be responsible for that.
I haven't given anything like that. I'm pro-masks and all of that. I don't know where
you've read the boards. You know that there are many conversations that simply wouldn't be allowed to go on.
You were kind of making it sound like I was one of those, and
well, no, I would ban you for a different reason.
Guys, isn't there a more important issue with 230? One of the principles of free speech, it seems to me, maybe not quite written down this way, is that I can't be made responsible for something that someone else says. And it seems like that should be true even without 230.
That's not a principle of free speech at all. The free speech principles are just that you ought to be able to express yourself and that it's your God-given right.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to disagree, because if you could suddenly make me responsible for what you said, I wouldn't have free speech.
Right. And also putting aside the God-given right.
But that is what the framers intended.
Putting aside the God-given right, IED that you threw in there, we're not going to let that explode. I would say that free speech, even if we understood it the way that you are suggesting it, does not require free audience. So you can say politically what you want to say, but you don't have access to every audience. You can't walk into a mosque and speak anti-Muslim propaganda. You can get arrested, and you should.
I can. I mean, you can. I'm not aware of any law saying that I can't go into a mosque.
If they tell you no, you are being disruptive, you need to. They can have you.
Depends on if you were breaching the peace.
They can have you dragged out in cuffs, and I would love to see it. But that said,
if a Muslim went into a church and started to peacefully,
based on the rules of the church, even the members of the congregation cannot peacefully disagree with the preacher while he's preaching and disrupt the service. The deacons would escort them to the door.
Yeah,
You do not have freedom of audience. You can't, for instance, just get access to Twitter's audience because you want it. First of all, you've got to sign up according to the rules of Twitter, and you've got to agree to the rules of Twitter. And then Twitter will let you speak as long as they decide not to ban you.
it depends on if you're in a public space or not.
But hold on, you do not have
That implies that they're a
access to
non-public space.
Twitter's audience. That's not free speech.
No,
So-
I agree with you that
Okay.
And Twitter is not a public space.
I agree with you. Well, it's a little bit of a quasi because of
No, it's not.
because of the removal of liability, which
No, it's
normally,
not.
well, it kind of is. I mean,
No, see,
not-
the problem is you're trying to conflate free speech and with 230. The only thing that 230 does is it controls liability because it categorizes some providers as being different than actual content providers. It has nothing to do with
But
free
you have-
speech, even though you're trying to shoehorn it in.
No. If you, and let me tell you, legally, it's always a very important thing to look at the legislative history for different laws, statutes.
Yeah, the legislative history for this one is big tech companies spent a lot of money convincing the Congress to pass this law.
The legislative history said that the whole purpose was to encourage free speech on these platforms because they saw that the whole social media thing was the way that that is the new public forum.
Let me try to give you some ground, Teddy, because I think that you would simply lose this argument on the facts. But
no,
but,
I won't.
but
Just give me
don't try to win it on the facts. Here, I'm going to give you an area where we can discuss it. Because I don't think we're ever going to be able to discuss it that way. But I think you brought up a more interesting question. We can ask a more interesting question, which is not whether Facebook and Twitter represent the public square, but whether they should.
That's what they were trying to do too. They said it.
So this is how I want to talk about it going forward. Should social media be regulated as a public square, so that people can speak? Now, what I said last week, and everyone jumped on me about, and I'm still going to say it again too this week, is that I think that if the government wants an online public square, they should make publicsquare.gov, and people can go there and they can run their own Twitter, Facebook, social media. That everybody in America can be qualified to have an account for this government social media, and the government can moderate it any way that they want to.
Let me think that idea very quickly. Under a Biden presidency, how free are conservatives going to be on that government-controlled?
I would think more free than on Twitter,
No,
if they
not.
think they're not, because it would be based on government rules, and we have
always the
Republicans and
hope
Democrats.
There's always the hope that the people that run Facebook might have more sense than Joe Biden. So, and there's probably,
but there will be a Republican president again, maybe in 4
I know.
years.
I'm just
There will
saying,
be a Republican Congress again. I'm just saying that why does it matter what the makeup of Congress is if the government had a social media network that had to follow constitutional rules the way that you want to regulate these private companies? Why wouldn't that be okay?
because power corrupts, and they're always going to want.
Well, then what you're saying is nobody can have a social media company. They're not even the government.
And so the government just getting out of the way.
In fact, Andrew, but before you go in, Andrew, Matt, you have just been staring at the camera thinking, and that makes me very uncomfortable. Would you say something with an accent, please?
I'm just flabbergasted that this is taking so much time to discuss this, and I'm not sure that you've actually got anywhere with it. I think the key thing here is not who fears prosecution from what. I think there should be a simple question of who has responsibility, and should there be some responsibility, and should there be something sensible applied to what is said. And if the answer to that question is yes, then somebody needs to do something. And I don't necessarily care who that is, but if someone's going to do something, it needs to be within a framework, so it makes sense that it is the government. But do we have responsibility? Should somebody hold responsibility for the content that is online?
But
Yes or no?
who fact checks
So-
the fact checkers?
Go ahead, Andrew.
So it seems to me, I think Darren was right that private companies can't be held responsible unless, and this is where I'm going to try to draw a line between you and Darren, something that I think probably appeals to Teddy too. The problem with saying Twitter is not public, I agree with it, right? If you want to know what's being said on Twitter, you have to follow someone or something like that, right? But the problem is, and the reason we're hashing this out the way we are, is that Twitter and Facebook at all act like they are public companies. Sorry, not public companies in the stockholding sense. They act like they are a public service, at least to some degree. And so if you want to have a private space, you've got to treat it like a private space. Seems like there's some real estate law here. If you own a piece of land, even if you pay the taxes on it, if you refuse to keep up the land, it can be taken back from you. If you are going to act like you are providing a public service, then you have the responsibility to treat all sides fairly. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or a Green Party or not, I don't care. If you are going to build your audience as if you are a public service, and in this case, I mean, anyone can come, they can register for free, that kind of thing, then you are in fact, to some limited degree, just acting like a come one, come all public service.
And Andrew, you've totally hit the nail on the head with that. And actually there is a term for that has been mentioned by the United States Supreme Court. It's called the public function test. And that was, I think it was like a 1946 case. Hold on, Marsh v. Alabama. There you go.
Of course it was Alabama.
Yeah, of course. And there was a company town. And in this company town, so the town was owned by a company as opposed to by the state. And in this company town, there was some sort of a law or regulation that said people could not go around talking, trying to hand out religious literature without a permit. And shocking in Alabama. And so that they would need a permit, but that's what you get from that company town. But anyway, so the Supreme Court said that, with the company town, even though it's privately owned, they are doing so much of what government does with their towns and functioning in so similar of a way that they found it to be an infringement of First Amendment rights, so that you wouldn't need a permit to hand out such literature. And so this whole public function test now, and again, remember Facebook and some of these other platforms, they were saying that they're going to be the big free speech platform. So it's not like they were trying to say something else. So that
Right, but they can change their mind, can't they? because I agree that these companies
And
are
we should-
acting, they are acting badly as public function.
Okay, yes.
So I think we
Bingo.
all agree that that's
Yes.
what they are
And
doing,
so
but that's not what they actually are. And I think
And I
that
don't
if they
think
had
it's their
just
intent
said,
I
either.
agree with you, but then
What-
what that
I'm sorry,
means,
what was that, Darren?
I don't think that's their intent either, because you have to sign a user agreement. And I don't know if you've ever been on the side of Facebook just randomly blocking you for however many days because they didn't like what you're posting, but they're not trying to be a free speech public space.
Right. Well, I would say that in the case of Twitter, anyway, they did, at least more than they do now, talk about free speech and non-moderation and things like that, because they want to act as a free speach conduit. And I've always said that that's the wrong language, because that's not what they are.
And
Look, we're
that's-
gonna have to cut this. We're gonna have to cut this one
one thing real quick.
short. I'll let you have the last word, Teddy, but I'm also going to throw in the last question, which is in your 230 free world, would there be room for specialized social media, say conservatives only social media, and then if you come in speaking leftist nonsense, they would ban you? Would there be a room for a leftist only social media company, or does everything on the internet that calls itself a social media company have to be open and fair and free?
I'm not advocating the elimination of 230. I just think that when they are
Well, for whatever you're advocating, same question.
okay. I mean, I'm not really keen on just a one-way thing. I mean, I think that people should be free to do that. I suppose. I mean, I think people should be free to associate with who they want, but don't go asking for immunity for liability.
Okay, so in your mind, if Twitter did not have immunity for the comments on their site, then it would be okay in your mind that they could ban anyone they wanted to arbitrarily.
Yes.
Okay.
And-
Look, that one's. I promised you this conversation. I feel like I've delivered you this conversation many times over. This is going to leave us room for maybe one or two quick topics. There are some things on the list that we're still not going to get to, but this is the end of this show. We're not going to do another week. If
just mention something really quick that's important.
okay,
And that is that, for example, with the Parler situation. So Parler was trying to set up a whole other social media thing to combat what was going on with Twitter and Facebook, where conservatives could not express themselves.
right, but they were
And
trying
then
to do it on other people's private networks.
The big tech that you were talking about, the big five, they then just crushed them. Of course, they're back now, but I mean, they did quite a bit of damage, and they were deplatformed for, I don't know, at least 2-3 weeks.
Sure, and when they piss off Russia, they'll be deplatformed again. So I don't. Is that really what you want to?
What's it got to do with Russia? It was.
I think that's where they're. I think that's who's hosting them now.
Yeah, that's where the only place they were able to find space.
Russia. Oh, I didn't know that. That's funny. Wow.
Yeah, it's hilarious, isn't it? Parler is dependent on Russia. So
Yeah, but if you actually go in and why they were knocked off the Amazon servers, I don't even think Teddy would disagree with that move.
right, and the fact is, if 230 were repealed somehow or changed even in the way that Teddy wants, Amazon would have never allowed them on. They simply couldn't have taken that liability. It is because of the protection that places like sites like Parler can get on the internet. So that said, I think I fulfilled my promise to speak freely on free speech. You are welcome, Teddy. I want to jump over to at least one topic. I want to talk about number 7 a little bit, because I think that encompasses a lot of what's left, which is my personal theory on the minimal unit of humanity as it relates to tech. So what I mean by the minimal unit of humanity is, I mentioned this a little bit last week, it's the lowest level that we will allow a human in society to go without helping. We just won't let a person go that low. And I think that we need a minimal unit of humanity in a lot of places, because I think that homelessness, for instance, is a real stain on any nation that even pretends to call itself a Christian nation. There should be no homeless people. There should always be four walls and a roof or a tent or something that a person without a home can go to. So I think that as we talk about the minimal unit of humanity, I was also thinking about this in conjunction with the question about technology as public utility, which technology should be public utility. So I thought about this a lot, and I still don't know that I can say it succinctly and intelligently, but I think that the minimum unit of humanity ought to be, at the very least, a basic level of healthcare. No one should be turned away from a hospital, and no one should have to get a bill for basic health needs. I think that we can do that, and we should do that. I believe that technology speaking, everyone should have Wi-Fi. Everyone in a boat, including the homeless shelters that I am envisioning, they should have Wi-Fi. And right now, the government in the U.S. is debating how to increase our what we call broadband in this country. And so we're trying to increase that definition, and it should be increased. And everyone should have that, because I believe that so much of society now is just dependent on the internet. It is very hard to get a job, just a job at McDonald's without the internet. You walk into McDonald's and you say they want a job, and they say now hiring, they will refer you to their website. And so I think that is a part of the minimal unit of humanity. I think that electricity is a part of the minimal unit of humanity. And the way that would work, in every apartment, in every home, there would be 3 or 4 plugs labeled, always on. And, you'd put one for the refrigerator, one for the oven, one for the heating unit, the air conditioning, and these plugs will always work. They will always work. And if you want the rest of your plugs to work, then pay your damn bill. But there should never be a situation when someone can't pay their electricity bill and their breathing machine doesn't work. So I think that power is a part of the minimal humanity that I'm thinking about. I think that access to a computer is a part of minimal humanity. And even if every work person can't own their computer, every person should have, whether they have ID or not, whether they have an address or not, should be able to walk into any library or any shelter or and use a public computer. They should have access to that, in the same way that they should have access to public telephones with free long distance. Bring back all of the phone booths or whatever you need to do, and make sure that people can make a call and not have to pay for it. This is stuff that technology allows today. It's easy. A lot of it is things that I think that we can afford, and some of this technology should have been considered a public utility a long time ago, and a human right as a part of what it means to be human in a society in a developed world. So again, wearing my socialist hat, this is some of my thinking about the minimal unit of humanity as it relates to technology. David Russell, you've been way too quiet. You are next.
I think there's loads of problems with your speech there, but I think there's too many problems to address and how we get that done. Mainly,
Sure.
and that's why
Pick up the biggest problem that you see.
Well, I don't know where you draw the line when it comes to doctors and healthcare, right? So if I'm a doctor, how am I going to get paid? How much am I paying in taxes for all these programs?
Taxes will go up, and doctors will be like public defenders. There will be public doctors as well. Not all doctors.
So if I refuse if I refuse, do I get conscripted?
Once again, I think that in the
Why
same
would
way
you
we have public
refuse?
defenders, I think that we
Why-
can have a system of public doctors too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just think there's so much there. Like I said, I would have to say it's a nice thought, but I don't see it happening.
Okay, but your
But
biggest
that's just
problem
me.
with it is you don't see how we pay for it. Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
don't see how we
Okay,
pay
but
for it. I don't
if we
see how it
could, you would
happens.
agree.
Oh, of course. I would love
Okay.
a utopia. I
Therefore,
would love a system where everybody's taken care of.
okay,
We're
but
the only
so-
first world country that doesn't have universal health care.
Right. So what you're saying is you agree with the minimal unit humanity concept. You just need convincing about the implementation. That's fine.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I think if we all agreed on it, we would figure out implementation. The reason we're not working on implementation is because we don't have agreement that it's something that needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I can see what you're saying, but you know, I would love a Star Trek world, man. You know, if we could do all that, we could start working on warp drive and transporters. dude.
It's not that
Eliminate traffic.
impossible. It's easier than you believe, honestly.
But with what David proposed, by the way, I don't have a problem with what David proposed. I think we do have a responsibility to raise the level of concern that we have about the most disadvantaged among us. So I'm not complaining about David's thesis, but there is a real cost to everything that David proposed. So let's go through what they were. Universal healthcare, some level of universal housing, some level of universal electricity, some level of universal device access, some level of universal internet. I'm not saying that those things are wrong, but David Russell is right to point out that these costs, as you add them up, are non-trivial.
Well, the cost for healthcare for the individual would actually go down under universal healthcare because right now, healthcare costs are between, what is it, like 400 and 2,000 a month for households. So even if your taxes went up $100 or $200 a month, you would still see a huge net gain from the individual on universal healthcare. As far as all the other stuff, given how much the U.S. pays for the military every year, you could easily implement everything David said with maybe 3 or 4% of the military budget. I mean, the cost is high, but
I don't know if
given
that's true or not. Are you sure about those numbers? That seems well. What
Yeah,
was
I've
our
seen
last
arguments going both ways. Like I see what Darren's saying, but I also see I've also read a lot of articles against what he's saying too. So I mean, I don't have him in front of me, so I can't even quote him, and I won't even try because you know it'd take some digging. But yeah, I mean, not here right now. I don't have any arguments, but I've seen both ways. I just want to put that out.
Right. And I just want to make clear that I don't have a plan for implementation. I'm not the government. I'm not the president. No one's made me hegemon.
I do actually have a plan.
Okay, great.
Hey,
Because
Dad, I've got to go, so I
It has
appreciate
to
the
do.
conversation, guys.
It has to do with Vulcans arriving and making first contact.
okie doke. So, Teddi,
Yes,
minimal unit of humanity. Thoughts?
we have that. We have a thing called Medicaid in this country. And so people who are falling through the cracks in society do get government paid health care. We have public housing. We have food stamps. So let's not act as if we don't have these. And every good society needs to, both through the government to ensure that those people who are falling through the cracks, I mean, there's some people who will, for no fault of their own, be unable through disabilities, things like that, be unable to take care of their basic needs. And so the government, a good government, does provide for those people. But there were also people who, through just unfortunate circumstances in life, are going to fall through the cracks. And the government needs to be and provide a safety net for them as well. And we do. But to subvert the system that we've had for all of these years, pre-Obamacare, is not a good idea. Look at the VA and how well that goes and how well that works out for our veterans. I mean, the people that are most deserving of the very best health care, the ones who put their lives on the line for our freedom and to keep us safe, and they get crappy health care. I mean, that is just a big black spot
So
on this
Teddy, just
country.
for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to cut in. I do understand what you're saying, but I think that to point to the services that the U.S. has is to maybe fail to understand fully the services that the U.S. Has. I have been, I've been on food stamps. I've been on welfare. I've been on Medicaid. I was dirt poor. I fought myself out of those things, and now I'm a man with a microphone that lights up red. So what I'm, so there is a path out and through, but I can tell you right now, public housing, just to give you an example, it is so hard to get into public housing. It's almost impossible. If this is why there's so many people who are homeless, it's extremely difficult and it's extremely limited. And I think that implemented the way it is, it's extremely bad. Getting onto services like welfare and food stamps and Medicaid is very hard to do. It's not just a matter of, oh, you're poor. Here, fill out this form and go get this food. That's not how it works in the real world at all. And so I think we have this, the fact that we have those programs does not in fact give us cover to say, oh, so we're doing so well with taking care of poor people. We are not. And I think that
let's go and reform that. And part of the reform, David, and I know I'm about to throw a grenade in here.
Eddie, before you do that, I'm just going to say I got a hard break. So it was good talking to all you guys again.
Yeah.
You guys got to have a good day.
We have made it to the 2-hour mark. So if anyone does want to do, they can. But so I will say, for the audience sake, because this is the last week we're going to talk about this, I am going to stay on and continue talking to until the last person drops. And if there's more to be said, I will say it solo. So for those who do have to go, just let me know, 5 minutes before you go, and you can have your say. Okay, fair. Okay, but look, that was I only wanted to say about the minimal unit of humanity. I wanted to put that point out there, and not so much talk about the implementation of how it works, because I think there are some countries that come very close to the kind of thing that I'm talking about. So it is possible, and we have a bigger country. We have more people. We have a very aggressive system of capitalism. I know there are a lot of differences, but the first step is agreement in principle that we need to start thinking about humanity in a very different way. The second step is to start thinking about how to do it. That's not the first step. The first step is never to figure out how you're going to do it. We didn't figure out how we were going to go to space before we decided that we were going to go to space. And we don't need to figure out how we're going to fund our minimal unit of humanity. until we decide that we want to do it. And that's the thing that I want to start building.
David,
Mhm.
what? Oh, is that?
Go ahead. You got the last word unless Darren wants it.
The grenade that I was going to throw in is that we have to look at, okay, you were talking about how public housing and things like that aren't working very well. I'm not in disagreement with you. And does reform need to happen? Yes, it does. And part of what also needs to happen is a change in circumstances to where we don't have a permanent underclass in this country, where it's not easy for people public housing. And David, I want to commend you with what you were saying about having been on food stamps and on welfare, and look at you now, right? And that's America, you know, where people can go from you know, having real struggles financially, and then, you know, having your own successful podcast, and, you know, having people like us on it.
Which may argue against whether it's actually successful. But
I may that too, so.
that's it.
But in all seriousness, but I mean, that is the beauty of America. And you talk about these other countries that seem to come closer to what you were talking about. People don't seek to emigrate to those countries. They seek to emigrate here. And that is because I mean, this is the land of rags to riches, and, you know, the stories abound. They do,
People immigrate to other countries.
That's why that's why a wall was being built, and that's why people are flooding, trying to come here. It's the
people immigrate to other countries, Teddi.
Where are they going? They're all coming. They want here. No, some people.
I know at least 3 people personally who moved to Britain.
But they probably were in Europe and didn't want to be too far away from their family in Europe.
These were Americans born in America who moved to Britain. I know 3 people personally.
Well, those might be the wackadoo.
Oh,
Careful.
I mean, that's the kind of, like, I'm if Trump gets elected,
granted,
I'm gonna.
It was before Brexit, so I don't
I'm
know
not saying Britain is a bad
but
place. I'm saying that, you know, doing the whole thing of, oh, if Trump gets elected or if Bush gets elected, I'm, you know, leaving the country. That's what I'm talking about.
So yeah, so moving on, I want to touch on this one while we still have a couple of people on the panel and in the audience. The digital divide. This is something that people used to talk about, maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And I don't hear very much about it now. What is meant by the digital divide? It's really a race thing, but also a class thing. It's to say that only the fortunate had access to a higher standard of technology, and on the other side of the tracks, those people didn't have access to technology, and therefore, without access to technology, they also were locked out of many opportunities. And people were saying this, like I said, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And so I just wanted to check in. Do we still have a digital divide today? Is that still a thing? Have we moved on from that? Are we all equal now?
No.
Go ahead.
No, we're not equal. And yes, it does still exist. And you brought me up sharp last week, David, when you mentioned that the digital divide also goes across color and race, because when I drew down the list of things where the digital divide exists, I had gender, and I had welfare, and I had education, but I didn't write down race, and unfortunately that was my white privilege showing through. There is race on the digital divide as well, but it exists in so many areas, and we need to do more to address that. And I think the most effective way of doing more to address that is by making sure that people are represented in the decision makers from all aspects from people on both sides of every type of divide that there is. That's certainly the first step that needs to be made. But yeah, absolutely, the digital divide exists. I look around my house. I'm worked in technology all my life. I'm familiar with technology, and while I'm certainly not wealthy, I'm not poor either. And so every person in my household has got multiple electronic devices for communication, either a laptop or a desktop, as well as a smartphone and others. And we all are familiar and we know how to use them. And because I'm technically savvy, I've made sure that everybody in my household is familiar with them. There are friends that my daughter has at school who have not got any of that. They haven't got the financial ability to buy as many devices, and they haven't got the technical know-how to ensure that everybody in their household is. And they just have to muddle along and do the best they can. They end up in all sorts of trouble. I've had phone calls from friends saying, we've got real problems with our computer. We have no idea what to do it. Can you help? And I say, yeah, sure. And I provide that, but they can only come to me for that free help because they know me or they have a contact who knows me. And these divides exist, and these divides exist far more prevalently than we realize. I don't know what the full answer is to knowing that, but we need to make technology accessible. And one of my pet peeves about technology is too often designed by the geeks, and geeks should be barred from creating human interfaces because they do it the way that works for them, which is not the right way to do it. We need people who are familiar. We need, for example, one of the car companies, Nissan, I think it was, one of their most popular cars, the reason why it's popular is they got women in to be part of the design process for the car, and they ended up with a better car. So we need people from all aspects of society who are involved in designing and creating these technologies, and the geeks just need to do what they're told to deliver what the broader spectrum have decided works better for everybody. And that is how we move our technology forward and make it accessible. 20 years ago, I once used to say that people should have a license to own technology because technology should not be in the hands of people who don't know how to use it.
I used
I
to
no
say
longer,
that too, shamefully.
and I no longer subscribe to that view. That view, it does not belong in today's world. Technology should be designed for the people.
So I just held up my keyboard there. I was going to point out a few, but this keyboard is loaded with keys that the average person will never press. They have no idea what it is, and we're used to typing around them. This was designed by geeks because there are things that programmers use that average people don't use. And I personally think we should have a programmer keyboard and let them festoon it with all the buttons they want to. But may a human being, a normal human being that doesn't have the developer implant, ever have to see an ellipsis key? What the hell is an ellipsis key? Nobody knows what that is. Nobody uses that. That's not we use it in conjunction with something. How some geek told us if we do this and this combination will happen. This is not a real. This is not a real letter. We have brackets and braces. You know what these are used for? They're used in programming. Yeah, I use them because I write a simplified form of markup. That's what I write. I write in Markdown. It's called. And so I use brackets, not the braces. I still don't know what those things are for. Those are the curly things that if you shift the brackets, you get what? We've got forward slashes and backslashes. I understand a slash, decide on a slash. Why do we have these things? They're not for us. That's this is why we have them. There's a lot on a standard keyboard. You know, on a Windows keyboard, home screen. Is that key still on the keyboards? You would know, Matthew. Yeah. What's that for? Nobody knows. Nobody's ever going to use that. This is human interface designed for people that weren't people. And so the very basic thing that you were just saying, Matthew, can be found on the keyboard that you use to type right now. And I do think that is part of what makes technology less approachable. It just wasn't made for people. It's something that people have to try to figure out and learn, as opposed to it being something that's naturally for them. Darren, you've been quiet. What are your thoughts on the digital divide
I
and
need
the
to
ellipsis key?
go. Sorry, so I'm going to give my apologies. Sorry for the short notice, but I really need to go.
No problem.
Right, guys.
We've enjoyed
Catch
it.
you up.
Bye.
Darren, your thoughts on the ellipsis key? I'm sorry, the digital divide.
Well, I don't know about you, but my mom's a writer, so she uses the ellipsis key all the time. Bill Barr used it a lot to make sure that the not in whatever statement he was quoting to make was well used. As far as the digital divide, I don't know. I've never really done any serious inquiry into it, but just from looking on the outside, it looks like it's mostly economics. So anything that the economics touches, whether that's race and gender or geography, that seems to be the sort of the central theme of that particular problem. And I think if we fix that, then a lot of the other problems will be fixed in sort of a ripple effect out from that.
I think age too. Was it Andrew that had mentioned age?
Yeah, I slightly disagree with that though. I don't think that technology is. I don't think there's a huge. I don't think it's as huge of an age divide as all of that.
Plus, that's a self-correcting problem.
I think socioeconomic class has more to do with it than age. So there are a lot of 70-year-old people who are pretty well off and well educated who are very competent with computers. You know, they FaceTime with their kids. They they maybe use social media. They're using technology quite a bit.
I think it might be perhaps those who are older but also have a higher education. I think it's that combination where you don't see the digital divide. But I have seen where when people are older and don't have a whole lot of education, where some people just don't even want to try. They just get so intimidated by it that they don't even want to try. And I've seen that.
I do think that the digital divide is not just a race thing, which but when it's spoken of, it's usually spoken of in terms of races. At least it was at the time when people were using the term. And I also think it was fairly accurate. I think that if you look at the technology that people had access to, there was a very different technology stack in the houses of white people as opposed to the houses of black people. But I think it's much broader than that. It oversimplifies it to make it simply a matter of race.
Was it really race, David, or was it economics? I think it was
economics is race.
No, not necessarily. I mean, it can be. And if you look at the 1950s before LBJ's Great Society, there wasn't that big divide between African American households and white households. And then when we see once the welfare state came in, and that's what brought about the decline. And that also started to help unravel. I mean, actually in the 1950s, you had a higher rate of couples staying married. I think I've heard in black households, they had a higher rate of staying together than in white.
So I'm going to pass on the bait there, and I assure you that there's a part of me that would love to engage with that, but not a big enough part. So for our purposes, let's jump to number 10, which I think is the last thing that we really haven't covered. And so, Darren, I'm glad that you're here for this piece of the discussion. Andrew wanted to be, but this was at the end of the list. Patents. Technology patents in particular. Let me set this up very simply. I think our patent system is broken. A patent is basically a right of exclusivity on an innovation for a temporary period of time. That is a patent.
Mhm.
And I think that the patent law is so badly written and so broad and so poorly implemented that we have a situation now that I'm not even sure what patents are for anymore. I think patents are only for lawyers because we have a thing called patent trolls. Darren, I'm sure you have some thoughts about patent trolls, so I'll make sure that you speak next. A patent troll is basically a person who buys a patent. They don't have to buy it. They could file a patent themselves, but usually these patent holding companies buy up portfolios full of patents. Furthermore, I think it's interesting that companies build portfolios full of patents that they don't use. This is another part of the patent process. I believe that if you are awarded a patent, it should be something that you have to use within a period of time. You should not have a portfolio of sleeper patents laying around like minefields. So what these patent trolls do is they buy up these portfolios of patents. They move to East Texas because that's where all the patent lawsuits happen. And they don't start off right away. When a company does something and it quote unquote violates one of their patents, they don't say, they're not especially interested in it at that point, unless the company is really big. What they want to happen is for the company to make a product that is really successful. And then they file a lawsuit saying, yeah, that violates one of our patents and they owe us $1 bazillion, because they need to first see that the patent can make $1 bazillion. And then they raise their hand and say, yeah, that's mine. And their ultimate end goal, besides a big check for $1 bazillion, is to get licensing rights in perpetuity for whatever the thing is. This is patent trolling. It is despicable. It is legal. And so once again, this is why I say patents are really for lawyers. They have nothing to do with innovators. They have nothing to do with time limited periods of exclusivity on one's innovation. They are utterly meaningless at this point. And what I want to see are is a useful patent system, not a broken patent system. But I think right now, patents are not only broken as implemented, I think they're downright immoral. And I also think that they limit, not help, the cause of innovation. I have some more thoughts about patents, but I'm going to turn it over to Darren, who I'm sure has a few thoughts about them too.
Well, when you mentioned patent trolls, it makes me wish the Christian hell mythology was actually true, specifically for them. But I don't know. I think our patent system is okay for right now. I think you're right. There are definitely some improvements that can be happen. Patents aren't forever. They are only between 17 and 20 years, depending on the patent. And you see some weird behavior, like the iPhone was the original one that came up with the sliding bar to unlock, and they
Slide
patented
to
that.
unlock.
Yep, they patented that. And so there was this big lawsuit between Apple and Android because Android was also using slide to unlock, but they couldn't because Apple owned the patent for that, which is why there was that weird period on Android phones where there was a lot of different unlock
Right.
procedures.
Draw a character to unlock, make a shape to unlock, shake your phone in a
Right.
certain way to unlock. Yeah.
Right.
Google
And
did that on their phones, but there other companies such as Samsung, which was the first to really break out, they didn't. They just said, screw it, we're going to slide to unlock, and we'll go to court.
Well, and that's because Samsung had their own patents that they could trade Apple's use for, so that Samsung could use the the Apple patents. They were
Right.
basically trading the use of patents.
Right,
is
but
why
this
Google-
again, I find despicable, because basically what Samsung said is, because we have power and we have something that Apple wants, we're just gonna freaking violate the patent, and then we will strong arm them over the thing that they want to use, or we'll make it a part of our negotiations because they're buying RAM from us and things like that.
Pretty
At
clever,
that point, you're not
yeah.
talking about a patent anymore. I don't even know why we're calling it a patent at that point.
Business.
Yeah, I think, well, and then Google bought that phone company. I forget which one they bought, but they bought it specifically.
HTC.
Yeah, bought it specifically for the patents because Apple was suing the.
Oh, they bought Motorola too. Yeah, Motorola. And
Yeah, I think it was Motorola
they
that I'm thinking of.
acqui-hired HTC later. Motorola's the
Yeah.
one you're thinking about.
And they sold pretty much the company to someone else.
They took a $12 billion bath.
Yep, but they got the patents, and so Apple was suing them at the time, and so they finally had leverage with Apple because they bought all these patents. And I think patents are actually a good idea for smaller companies. I think if we were to fix the patent system, I would actually fix it in a way that once your company hits a certain size, whether that's monetarily or by person, and it would have to include the entire network of companies that are all owned by the same people. So the big company didn't just roll out a new company that has just one person. But I think at some point you would become so successful that you give up your right to have a patent or create a patent. And then the small companies would be the ones that are able to actually create patents.
So
And
I got my
think,
own solution, but before I give my solution, Teddy, you're fit to be tied.
Yeah.
Patents.
So, Darren, if you strip big companies of their patent rights,
I wouldn't strip them of their current patents, just the one from creating new ones.
okay, but well, future ones. So if you take those away, a lot of times some of the most brilliant innovations are going to come from the bigger companies because they may have, the best of the best working for them. They can afford the massive research and development that certain brilliant innovations require. And
Right, which is why they don't need the protection of patent anymore at that point.
but no, but if, for example, let's take a pharmaceutical company, and I think we're all in favor of, the best drugs out there, pharmaceutical drugs out there possible for
We all
illness.
want good drugs.
We
That's
all
true.
want good drugs. And good drugs cost a lot of money in research and development. And then you have the issue of so many of these things that they research don't pan out. So then all of that money goes down the toilet. And then you have all of the things where, okay, they do come up with something, but it doesn't get FDA approval. And then that goes out the window. Or then something does get FDA approval, and then it turns out it has these weird side effects. And then they get sued by, in a big class action lawsuit, and they bleed money that way. And so we have to remember that with these big corporations, there are shareholders. And if they're not making a profit, and it has to be a big enough profit where there's an adequate return on the investment and the risk that they take. And even with pharmaceutical, I don't know how long it is. I think they've shortened the amount of time that they have patents on new drugs because they go to generic fairly quickly nowadays. But if you undercut the capitalist system, what you undercut is the incentive to create, the incentive to take risk. And so it kind of goes back to the whole thing of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I get what you're saying, Darren, but I just think that that what the ultimate result is going to be is you're going to have far fewer new things coming out that can make
Well,
huge differences in people's lives.
well, the
Let me
problem
lay
with your
another-
analogy is that patents don't actually help any of that for big companies, because big companies don't, like the chemical companies you were talking about, they
Mhm.
don't, the reason the generics come out so quickly is because the generics change something so they're outside the patent. So just slightly. So so it's not the patent that's protecting the chemical companies. It's their brand, marketing, and all the money they have to throw at something, because you can't just create a drug in your basement. You actually have to have the resources in order to do something like that, even if you already know the formula for creating it. So
In India, there are a lot of there are companies in India that are big with making generics, and I agree with you. I mean, the generics aren't 100%.
yeah, but patents don't protect India from creating the same thing, because
I'm pretty certain that when they come out with the new drug, they've got, don't hold me to this, I want to say it's maybe 10 years or so to where you know, they have exclusivity, and then it can go generic. It's not that it automatically goes generic because they tweak a little bit of something. And an interesting thing is too that a lot of times the generics work just fine for everyone, but and they'll frequently say that generics are, it's the same thing. Well, it's not. Sometimes it's the little fillers in it that are a little bit different, but that sometimes can make a difference with different people taking the medication. So it's not always a total apple to apple comparison, but for most of the time, generics work great for people. So I'm not trying to,
right, but that doesn't have anything to do with the patents.
but you can't do a generic until the patents run out.
You
In the
can't
US, you're
legally do a
correct.
generic.
But China doesn't care about our patents.
Yeah, but I don't know how many people want to take a drug made in China either.
Well, I'm guessing there's billions of people, because they have their own drug companies over there.
Yeah,
It's not like
but
America has
funky
the only drug companies in the world.
You talk about lead paint in children's toys, and
Yeah, which has nothing absolutely to do with patents.
I know that, but I'm talking about things made in China.
So let me just jump in and moderate just a little bit, because I agree with both of you. I think that you both have points, and I am somewhat torn over it. I do believe the thing that I care about is intellectual property. I was a musician before I was any of this. I have an album on iTunes right now that I don't make any money off of, but and I don't even want to point you to it, but it's there. You can get it. If you have Apple Music, you can listen to it now, stream it for free. I've been making intellectual property for a long time. I write for a living, so there's some intellectual property there. What I care about is a person having a right to make money off of their ideas. And so I have an idea. Let's say I write a song and I present it to a publishing company. The publishing company rejects my song, but then a couple months down, I hear star singer whoever singing a song that's just like my song, published by the publishing company that I sent it to, and that's going to make me a little bit. That's going to make me feel a certain way. Right? That's because
Right, but that's copyright you're talking about there.
Right, right. I understand, but I'm what? So I'm sorry. That's why I put it in the terms of intellectual property. So copyrights, copyrights, trademarks, and patents, I kind of tend to put in the same bucket when I talk about this because the real bucket that I'm after is IP. That said, patents are the particular thing that we are talking about now. I just wanted to say that I do have a great deal of sympathy for people, whether they are wealthy or poor, who have an idea and they go through the trouble of making that idea and they bring that idea to life, they should have a chance to make money on that idea. That said, I do believe that patents should be temporary so that no one can own an idea forever. Now, I do agree with Darren largely that part of the thing is that patents really aren't the driving force behind a lot of this. And here's how you can know that. A company like Apple can innovate and make a blank, whatever the blank is, whatever the next thing that they decide to do is, they can make it. I guarantee you that, a few weeks after that, Samsung, Xiaomi, whatever fast follower you want to mention, will have one out there too, and it'll look exactly the same way, or mostly the same way, so close that people will be confused by it, and it'll work mostly the same way. It'll have some version of that feature, because the companies, they make stuff based on Apple rumors, so that by the time Apple releases, it's out, and so Apple, however, is going to be a $3 trillion company in a few months. I don't feel sorry for Apple in in that sense, but they do have the right to make things and profit on it. But the reason we know that the patent system doesn't work is because companies like Apple are so immediately copied that anybody who wants to copy it does copy. Apple doesn't have enough time or money to sue everybody who copies them. And the courts aren't going to let Apple own an idea anyway. If it's a big idea, like, for instance, the iPhone. It's a big idea. It was clearly different than most of the other things that come before it. And you can kind of see it in photos. You can look at the smartphones before the iPhone and the iPhone, then look at the phones that were immediately after the iPhone. This is what the industry did. Patents be damned. And so there was absolutely nothing about the patent system that stopped or slowed down, quote unquote, innovation proliferating throughout.
That's because the iPhone didn't come up with something new. They did what was already there better than everyone else.
Well,
that's
but
why the
things that they did that were uniquely iPhone, that were uniquely them, even down to the design of icons, everyone just copied. They just, yeah, we're gonna do that. And
no, because it's not that that people ignore the patent system. It was that Apple could not patent those because they already existed.
Well, and one of the things, just to provide a little bit of clarification, you actually can't copyright an idea, and you can't patent one either. It's got to be in a very specific form. And so
yeah, but I question the form that that they're done. I believe someone patented, Darren, tell me if I'm right about this, that the making of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is something ridiculous like that. And they have, people patent this kind of stuff all the time. People have patents for perpetual motion machines. There will never be such a thing. That's fine, but the patent office is glad to give you a patent for it. I think that it is very broken, and patents are kind of meaningless and stupid, and they don't do the thing that they were intended to do. And so my solution to the patent problem is this, and it doesn't make me happy. It won't make either of you happy. It won't make any of the listeners happy. My solution, though, would be to make all patents FRAND patents, which is free, no, not free, fair, reasonable, and fair, reasonable, and something else. So people who build things like, I don't know, standards like, well, Qualcomm, for instance, would be an example. People who would maybe build network chips, for something like 5G or LTE. Those are licensed under FRAND. And what that means is they have to sell the licenses to this to everybody who wants to buy a license for it at a fair and reasonable price that is uniform across the board. And so what that kind of license does is the company that comes up with this, they can make $1 bazillion because everybody has to license it from them, but they have to be fair in the licensing. And what companies
competition, which
right, but what companies do, what companies like Qualcomm do, and this was the subject of a lawsuit from a couple of years back, they would take a company like Apple, who makes the iPhone, and Apple needed LTE chips. They would license them from Qualcomm, but Qualcomm would charge Apple way more than anybody else because Apple's rich and they make the iPhone. That is illegal under FRAND. That's the kind of thing that you can do if you don't have a FRAND license, and the kind of thing that you can't do if you do have a FRAND license. So if every patent was a FRAND type patent, then no company would have exclusivity on anything for any period. They would have to license it to people who wanted to use it, and the people would have to pay them a licensing fee, a small, reasonable licensing fee. And that would be it.
I don't know about the small part. I mean, it should be reasonable, but reasonable might not be small.
Well, but it is a matter of regulation. And so I don't know what defines a fair, reasonable fee, but that is something that's regulated, and that can be and is quite frequently challenged in court. If a company holding a FRAND license is trying to stick it to somebody, a judge can knock that down.
Yeah, but it's got to be enough to where the company remains incentivized to come up with
non-discriminatory. Fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory.
Okay.
That's FRAND.
I'm down with that. And so there must be some sort of flaw if I'm agreeing with you on something like that.
Well, I like it for the larger companies, but what about this garage companies that are just getting started?
I think the smaller companies would actually benefit more from a FRAND license than from a normal patent. And the reason I say that is because let's say, one of my harebrained ideas, the better drinking straw that I have drawn up in my mind for people who drive cars and drink big gulps. Don't worry, I'm not gonna bore you with the details of my driver's straw, but I'm never going to be a big company, even if I did it. So
I
don't want to sell straws to people. I want to sell a license to companies that want to make their own straws based on my patent. And so
what about the people that do want to make straws?
Well, so they can still make straws and they can sell them for whatever they want to, but they would also have to license it to other companies. So let's say a big company wanted to license.
So you're taking away the thing that makes them unique, so they can't gain market share.
Yes, they won't be able to gain
to a
market
company
share.
that will completely crush them, because they'll never be able to.
That is absolutely true that they will not gain market share, but they won't be crushed because they will be getting paid, so much per straw. And so if a big company sells 1 billion straws a year or a month, and you're making a penny off of that, you're still doing okay as a small guy who had an idea. I think you did okay.
Don't have your company. You basically made it impossible for that guy to build a company.
Well, actually, what would happen, even with or without a patent, is a big company would just buy them. Now, I have some feelings about whether big companies should be able to buy small companies, because I think that crushes innovation too. And I'd almost rather see small companies take their shot and die out rather than to be swallowed up by big companies. But
Well,
if
that sounds like
that's how we're going to do things, then in your example, we don't have to worry about whether that small company makes it big. They're not going to make it big. They're going to get bought out by a big fish.
so you're in favor of monopolies then?
But no, no, yes. It's, yeah, I'm conflicted on monopolies too. I think that
Well,
that
because your proposal will make it impossible not to have monopolies.
Well, I think it's impossible not to have monopolies now, which is part of the problem. And so the reason I wanted to end with patents is because of where we started. So you'll recall that I proposed the notion that companies that once they get big enough, they're going to be anti-competitive by the nature of their size. There's just no way not to be, and that there are certain inventions that become so much a part of the public good that they have to be regulated, essentially taken over by the public in some way. At the same time, until a company gets there, they should be able to do what they do. And we just need better definitions about what it means for a company to get there. But I do hate big companies buying up small companies. Whenever some small company does something that's interesting, they don't have the room to breathe and they have to sell. And these days, small companies, they're not even out there to become big companies. Most of the stuff that is in the entrepreneur tech field these days are companies that don't have a business model. The only reason they exist is to prove a concept and get bought by a big company. That is the business model. So, something like Clubhouse. Clubhouse doesn't want to be Clubhouse. Clubhouse wants to be bought by somebody. So,
But David, for example, like with Facebook and Twitter, they're huge, but Parler went from being just, nothing to boom. They got, I don't have the number of how many million people signed up, but I mean, conservatives just like flocked.
sure,
like
I bet Parler would have been happy if Fox News had written them a check for $100 billion.
But had Amazon and all these other folks not tried to deplatform them, it would have been okay. Parler would have done just fine. It was
outside of the conversation of patents, but yes.
But it was when the anti-competitive move kicked in, where they were trying to deplatform Parler. That's when the big company was doing wrong.
Well, but that wasn't anti-competitive.
Well, the big companies weren't doing wrong in that case because of what Parler was doing.
Yeah, that wasn't anti-competitive behavior at any rate.
Yeah,
so
that was Parler's fault for doing what they were doing.
And all of those companies, it was like several of them, boom, just deplatformed. It all happened. It was just boom, boom, boom.
Right,
like
because
Parler
was at fault in
every
that
one of those companies that deplatformed them initially had welcomed Parler onto their platforms. Every last one of them. They knew what Parler was in the first place. They all said, "Yeah, you're not violating anything. Sure, you can be on this platform." They deplatformed them after Parler engaged in many bad acts. So you're kind of drawing a picture as if to say these companies, they hate Parler and they just wanted to hurt them. No, every one of these companies welcomed Parler onto their platform.
Parler because they wanted the money. I mean,
they did it because Parler was allowing people to plan to plant bombs at the United States Capitol and coordinate attacks and
that was
people.
done on Facebook. On Facebook, it was found that there were groups that were coordinating,
and those groups were closed down.
Yes,
on Facebook.
Deplatformed them too.
That was not Parler. I mean,
yeah, it was. We've got the screenshots and everything of Parler doing that, and then Amazon asked them to get their people under control. Parler refused, and so Parler was removed because they broke Amazon's terms of service.
Apple was one of the last companies that removed Parler. They weren't the first one, and there's a paper trail. They talked back and forth to Parler a lot about their moderation policies and the particular problems they were having.
Facebook
Parler
didn't-
did not change to meet the terms of services for these companies.
Then what about Facebook? Why is Facebook still around?
Well,
Given
because,
that
well,
Facebook,
for one, Facebook owns their own servers. They're not using someone else's servers. And
If-
second, they are moderating their own
but
people.
actually, but they found that on Facebook that there were groups, you know,
Yeah, and a lot of those were closed down.
About even all the Antifa and Black Lives Matter stuff.
If Amazon owned the servers that Facebook ran on, Amazon could close them down.
Come on, I mean, it's left against right.
Wait a minute.
No,
don't-
actually,
would-
it isn't. Only
If
in the Fox
Amazon
bubble
owned
is that
the
a reality.
servers, Amazon could shut them down.
But they
Parler
wouldn't
doesn't
have,
own anything,
but they wouldn't have. And actually, there was a
and they
big
still don't own anything. They still don't own their
there was
servers.
a big stink at Parler. That's why I think it was their CEO that got booted out, because he was the one that wanted to go to Amazon, and they were like, the other people were like, what do you
Right.
do?
What do you think is going to become of the guy who said, yeah, let's go to Russia? How do you
that's
think
just
history's going to remember
desperation.
him?
That's just desperation. That's like when you've got no other choices given what has happened.
The Russians, they're big on free speech there. It's
Well, I
still
mean,
there.
they like to just see a dust up, and they don't like, in terms of like when Hillary ran for president, you know, they were doing disinformation on both sides. If you buy into all that, I mean, so
just
but it wasn't
just
one-
for the
they
sake of the
trying
audience,
to
I'm going
stir
to
pot.
I'm going to shut us off. I'll allow you to continue to talk after we're done here. In fact, I might even keep the tape rolling just because. But officially speaking, this show is over. It ended about 20 minutes ago. And it's been a lot of fun. Believe it or not, this is what I call a palate cleanser. Next week, we get into the serious business of the hiddenness of God. Hopefully, I will have my voice back by then. Expect to see the blog within the same day that you see this go up. Skeptical Speakers at skepticalspeakers.squarespace.com. It'll be on the hiddenness of God. You will see it. Read the blog, start the comments. We will do the show next week. If you want us to talk about something in the show, leave a comment in the blogs. We will be perusing the discuss for your comments. Besides that, I think that's it. Thank you. And we will continue with the after show for as long as I decide this train wreck goes on. You were saying train wreck, Teddy.
Oh, I'm not train wrecked. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm just like, I know I was listening to Dan Bongino, and he is one of the investors, one of the, I think the three people that kind of initially invested in Parler. And I'll have to go looking into that, the whole thing about the screenshots. I know that part of it was just that, you know, when you have free speech, there's going to be stinky speech in there too.
Well,
And
you know,
so-
Section
Yeah, no.
230 would make them liable. I mean, if you take out Section 230, if you modify it the way you want to, Parler would have been liable for that. And then where would they have been?
It has to do more though, in terms of Section 230. And actually, this is what the amendments need to address. It's the unfair, unequal application of the rules. So it's kind of like if you're going to say you can't have certain harassing behavior or hate speech, it can't just be hate speech from one political side of the aisle. It needs
Yeah,
to
well,
go-
Parler wasn't deplatformed because of hate speech. They were deplatformed for fomenting violence. And
I'll
yes,
have
if
to-
the left is fomenting violence, they're going to get deplatformed as well.
I will. I remember when that stuff was going down. I was listening to Dan Bongino's podcast. He is a former Secret Service agent, and he served under Obama and George W. Bush, if I remember correctly. And he like I said, he's one of the 3 investors in Parler, and he was getting into all that. But of course, it's been a little while now, and my memory's not fresh on those details. But I'll look into it, and
Do you deny that Parler had bad actors that were doing things worthy of getting banned?
I will. I'll tell you what. I heard what Dan Bongino said, but all I can tell you is that everything Dan Bongino says that I've ever heard him say, it's all come out to be true. For example, with the first impeachment hearings, he's written
That's not what I asked. Do you think that Parler was engaged in there was speech engaged in on Parler and things done on Parler that was worthy of them getting banned?
I'm not aware of any. So,
okay,
I'll look into it, and I'll
provided that there were in fact things that were worthy of them getting banned. Do you have a problem with that at that point? So it's just a matter of you needing more information, is what I'm hearing. Because we can get you more information. The information's easy. The information's out there.
For example, if somebody's engaging in criminal behavior, federal criminal behavior, like
which is what Parler was doing,
conspiring to to blow something up, things like that, then then maybe they should have been pushed. But I think that they would have taken stuff like that down. So
no, they didn't.
They didn't. That's why they were deplatformed. That's exactly why.
That's the thing with the left. I mean, a lot of times the facts are so skewed. So I will look
once again, you say the left. If you're saying big tech that let Parler in the first place, the left, they are the ones who gave them the platform.
Yeah, but they also gave it to them when they were tiny, and then all the conservatives just like Parler just.
Yeah, you shouldn't be trying to politicize this. It has nothing to do with right and left.
But I think it does.
Well, it doesn't. You're just wrong.
I'm just telling you. I trust what Dan Bongino says. No, like Ronald Reagan always said.
Why aren't there platforms on the right then? Why instead of complaining about the left? Why not go to some servers owned by the right? Do the right not know how to use computers? Do they not have any innovation? Do they not have any companies? Do they not have what? Why is it the left?
That was the right. I mean, because of what has been going on with Facebook and Twitter and all of this with this censorship, that is precisely why.
You do realize that
you're missing the question. If you think that this is a leftist agenda, where are the rightist companies that they could go to?
That's where they're starting to come about, because they're starting to realize that they need a parallel economy.
Why are they just now starting? We've been in
because it's become extreme now. Things.
Well, you do realize that Facebook.
You mean to tell me that before now, no
conservative
company wanted to make an Amazon? They never wanted to make an Apple. They never wanted to make a Microsoft. They never wanted to make a Twitter. Only now they're interested in that. Where is the innovation from the right?
Of course, Amazon, engages in a lot of anti-competitive practices. So that definitely tends to make it difficult.
Your Honor, the question, she fails to answer the question or even acknowledge it.
It makes it difficult for both people on the right and the left to go up against them. And look at Facebook. Facebook is so dominating the area, and it's through advertising. And not only that, but then you get with Google, where the search engine itself.
So only lefts advertise?
People. The what?
Only the left advertises?
No, but I'm saying, but because the platform with Facebook is so huge, there's such a huge audience, both people on the right and left are going to want to advertise.
So where is the right's version of Facebook?
Well, I mean, they're working on it, and that's.
Well, they're not working on it though if they're buying space on Amazon servers, because Facebook doesn't have to worry about that.
That was the idiot move of the CEO of Parler, and there were a lot of people that disagreed with that, and that's why he got booted out.
Plus Zuckerberg's not a leftist. I hate to break
have you heard of Peter
bubble,
Thiel?
but Zuckerberg's not on the left.
Zuckerberg's not a leftist. That's what Darren is saying. Have you ever heard of Peter Thiel? You know who Peter Thiel is?
Yeah,
Okay.
but Zuckerberg is like the Nancy Pelosi types, I think. They're all
He bent over
capitalistic.
backwards and broke Facebook terms of service users to keep conservative voices on his platform.
So did
So
Twitter,
you
by
can't
the
say
way.
that he's got an anti-right agenda.
I know tons of conservatives. I don't really use Facebook hardly at all, but I know tons of conservatives who were active on Facebook. I mean, look, they were shutting
Well, yeah,
down.
there's tons of leftists that got
shut
banned
down
from
the New
Facebook
York-
too.
They shut down the New York Post article, for example, on Biden and both
The New York
Fox
Post
and
should
the
be shut
Times.
down on general principles, but
Okay.
that's
Come on. It's the fourth
different matter.
largest publication in this
Well,
country. It was
yes,
founded
they
by
have the right to stop
and they
misinformation from
shut down
perpetrating
before
on their
the
platform.
Don't tell me that that's not, them tinkering and with, politics and them showing their leftist.
Both Facebook and Twitter, as Darren mentioned, I had Twitter bent over so far backwards to keep conservative speech going that was against their policies, their stated policies. Liberals, including me, were shouting, saying, what's going on, Facebook, Twitter? You've got terms of service. This is not a judgment call. Here are the things that the conservatives are saying. You should ban this post, and you should ban the post. They did not. You know what they did? Hold on. You know what they did? Both companies, they changed their rules, and they did it 2 or 3 times in order to keep the conservatives going. It was a long time before they finally actually banned anybody.
How about the business of if anybody brought up that the election was stolen, that boom, you're gone.
Well, that's a lie.
Yeah,
It's complete misinformation.
No, it's not a lie.
materially untrue, and it was the thing that caused that.
It was not.
It is the thing that created the
Yes, Teddy, I hate to
atmosphere.
tell you this, but it's complete and total fabrication that the election was stolen.
It's
all
not.
all of the states did double as their policy and their process. It's been like this for decades, hundreds of years. They double check everything, and nothing was
Thing that
found.
occurred right before the elections, where all of these, what was it, 4 or 5 states that were Republican
Teddy,
dominated.
it's
The
nonsensical, Teddy.
The Constitution says that if you're going to change
Teddy,
election laws, it has to
utterly
be
nonsensical.
state
Courts
led-
heard this argument
No, they did.
and
They did not. The
denied
Supreme
this argument.
Court- the
Yes,
Supreme
Trump
Court-
Trump lost 60 some odd lawsuits because he did not have the evidence. He did
I
not
think it was
have
61 out of
the standing.
62.
Okay, I'm telling you, first of all, this is not debatable in terms of, first of all, the rigging that went on with those 4 or 5 states that were Republican
Yes, it's
controlled.
not debatable if you shoot the other people in the
No,
debate, but
listen.
otherwise,
But listen, David, the Constitution,
Yeah.
U.S. Constitution
Familiar
states
with it.
you cannot change you cannot change election laws in a state except for the state legislature to do that.
judges
What
did
leftists
rule on
did,
that.
they went through the judiciary and they made changes, and then they started taking away all of these rules, saying, "Oh, it's for COVID."
Judges
all of
did
the things-
rule on that, Teddy.
They could not do that. That is illegal.
Well, the
Apparently-
judges disagree with you.
Well, those judges are morons.
Okay,
Well, the same
well,
can be said
who-
for you.
I'm telling you, just because, judges do all sorts of things. You know what? Judges said that people.
So Republican
All of the
judges
judges
who
ruled
voted
this
who
way.
shot all this
All of
down
them.
are morons.
Supreme
Okay,
Court
Republican judges are
said
morons.
that
I like it.
People could be property, and so screw those judges. Just because a judge says
I
something.
agree.
doesn't
Screw the
mean
Republican
it.
judges.
No, it wasn't. Those were Democrat judges that
No,
said
they were Republican judges, a lot of them.
that those were not. It was Chief Justice Taney, who was a Democrat. He was
In case a
appointed-
sponsor wants to
and
sponsor me,
Jackson.
this sounds like a good time for icebreakers. Icebreaker mints. It makes everything mintier. Go ahead.
Like the ice, like
Well,
the fire.
the right was never able to produce even a single bit of evidence that anything wrong happened. And when they went up to the Supreme Courts for those states, the Supreme Courts all said that was fine.
Lots of people have been caught with lots of ballots in Texas. There were a bunch
No,
of
they
people.
weren't.
So it was this lie, Teddy, that led us to the insurrection. It's this lie that led to the violence, and this is why platforms.
Joe Biden and his.
This is why platforms had to finally do something about it. It's not that they're so puritanical. Hang on, it's not that they were so puritanical that they were trying to legislate against lying. Politicians lie all the time. This particular lie is what fomented insurrection. They had no choice. They had no choice but to do what they did.
Insurrection. First of all, the only person that died was an unarmed veteran. Where's all the Black Lives Matters?
Wait. There were five people died.
No, that's not true. That is
Yes,
absolutely fake news. No, it's not.
Just because it disagrees with your narrative doesn't make it fake news.
Wait, how many people died?
Liberals now are admitting to that.
How many people died?
Capital, one person died as a result, and that person was an unarmed person. And now I'm not saying she should have done what she did, but how come there's no call for all the people, Black Lives Matters? Here's an unarmed person that got shot by the police. How come nobody's raising a stink over that? Nobody's looking into, well, what exactly did she do? Let's see the video footage. Did they really need to shoot her? And she was a veteran.
Did you realize there's all sorts of investigations going on around that, right?
Yeah, but you know what? If it had been a Black person, what would have happened? What would have happened?
I don't know. A Black person storming the
All hell
Capitol.
would have broken loose, as if it's not like it had even
Yeah,
stopped.
if Black people were
Senate
storming the
chambers.
Capitol, they would have had actual guards there.
First of all, they didn't even, the guards weren't even really stopping people. Now, I'm not saying that they should have done what they did. They should have remained with the other peaceful protesters. I'm all for the fact that there was a protest there because that needed to be done. But in terms of, going into the Capitol and all of that business, I'm not supporting.
Yeah, they erected a gallows for Pence.
Yeah,
because Trump said that he should be held
that.
accountable.
Okay, no, but I've not heard anything about gallows. For
You
Pence,
never saw.
right?
Oh, come on!
No.
You never saw the gallows?
Are you like do you do nothing but watch Fox News or OAN?
I watched this. Just so you know, I was watching the news. I had taken off that day. It was Wednesday.
TV.
I took that day off because I knew that something like this was going to happen, and being in the business I wanted to cover it, and so I watched all day until it did. I watched all the coverage, and it is so hard. I watched it all live for about 24 hours. I can hardly believe that you were seriously telling me that you don't know anything about the gallows.
No, I did watch some of the coverage.
You didn't see the gallows?
No, I didn't.
Hang Mike Pence. They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," and they actually had a wooden structure with a noose.
Okay, well, and first of all, they did find that there has been testimony of some people where they did find agitators there. So I don't know whether, if that was.
Yeah, and then the people that were actually there went on to their social media and said, hey, these people weren't here. We did this.
I don't know. I don't know. So.
Well, I know you don't know because you're spouting all these lies about this information.
I know y'all's news sources.
The fact that you don't know about the gallows tells me that you're not credible to have this conversation, Teddi.
Perhaps the reason I've not heard about the gallows is
because you watch whatever the most conservative rag is.
Listen, I listen to conservative talk radio. I don't watch Fox News. I'm not.
Well, that doesn't make it better.
During the election, Fox News, I couldn't distinguish them from CNN, quite frankly.
Okay, but what conservative source did you hear that never talked about the chance to hang Mike Pence and the gallows that they erected?
I never heard it from Dan Bongino. I never heard it.
This should tell you that you should not be listening to those sources. Just Google it.
Well,
you can see pictures, probably video that was captured live. Go for it.
Let's just assume, okay, because I have not.
Sure, let's assume that it's actually true, since it is.
For the sake of argument that it's true. How do we know that it wasn't Antifa doing
Because
that?
the people that actually did it said it, and they said they weren't Antifa. They actually went in and made videos of themselves.
Okay, if Antifa is trying to subvert things, you think they're going to say, they're trying to pretend like they're Republican.
It wasn't the good Republicans that were doing the insurrection. It was Antifa.
Actually, there was
because Republicans aren't about guns and small government or anything like that. I mean, that's completely out of character for Republicans.
Look, I'm telling you, I wasn't too happy with Pence either, but that's not the typical thing.
Did you want Mike Pence hanged?
Huh?
Did you want him hanged?
No, I didn't say I wanted him hanged.
Oh, well, good, because the people in the crowd were shouting for him to be hanged.
I felt that he did wrong. Most of the crowd, by far.
What did Mike Pence do wrong?
Protesting.
Wait.
He should have stood up and he should have argued against the whole thing with the
under what part of the law? Because you keep holding up your Constitution. I'm familiar with the Constitution, not the dummy I look like just because I look like I'm from the Witness Protection Program. So tell me what constitutional thing that you think Mike Pence could have done in those chambers that day. Because that was another part of the big lie, that somehow all Pence had to do was to reject it and he could stop it. There's nothing that Pence could have done. Tell me what Pence could have constitutionally done.
Let's back up to the Electoral College. The electors that
is this going to lead to you telling me what Pence could have done?
It will, because he did not have to just put his stamp of approval on that, and he could have challenged.
What could he have done?
He could have challenged it.
How?
No, he couldn't. That's not part of what he can do.
I would argue that you are factually just wrong, and you don't know the law or the Constitution if you think that he could have.
Because Al Gore would have
ceremonial
when he was doing it.
Role.
No,
there's nothing in that role that would allow him to do it.
The VP is the tiebreaker, and I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, that's urban.
There's no tie.
I know. I'm trying to remember. Well, no, I think I'm trying to remember now. I know that Ted Cruz and
by the way, I know that you know the law. Okay, so anyone who's still listening to this, I'm not accusing you of not knowing the law.
And Mike Pence didn't have to roll over. Mike Pence did not have to roll over.
Roll over in what way? I'm having trouble.
I'm pretty sure Mike Pence knew that Trump was full of bullshit. None of that was actually happening.
Right. There was nothing that Pence could have done in that. I've looked at the Constitution on that. I've listened to it read by others on that very clause. Pence's role is very regimented. Pence himself looked at the Constitution. I believe he probably wanted to challenge it. He simply couldn't. There's no.
I don't think he did. I don't think, quite frankly, he's quite got that in him.
There is no clause in the law that would allow him to challenge the result.
He could have done something. He could have done something. He could have
done what?
He could have.
I'm asking you, done what?
At minimum, he could have spoken up and said something.
No, actually, he couldn't. He would have been out of line.
Out of line?
Yes, he would have been out of line to do so. He couldn't. He could not.
Does he not have free speech rights?
No, not in the Senate chamber carrying out that function. He does not.
Could have, yes.
No, he could not have. He has a specific duty that he has to do. He does not have the right to go beyond that duty.
I disagree. I don't think so.
Well, you can
Well, you
disagree
also
all
didn't
you
even
want.
know about the
We're talking about
gallows, so-
constitutional law.
I'll have to look into that, but I don't think that he could have said something. And
No,
even just,
he could not
and
have.
even, you know what? Even as a patriot, even as an act of civil disobedience,
He could have been called out of
Civil
order
disobedience.
by the Senate.
through being out of order.
Okay, well, I ask you for some legal thing that he could have done to change the result of this, and you don't have anything. And the reason
No,
is because
I'm saying-
constitutionally, once again, everything that happens in that
I don't
procedure,
remember the
hold on,
details.
everything that happens in that procedure is laid out in the Constitution, including the time of day that it's supposed to happen. It's very detailed, it's very regimented, and there is no room for the vice president to get up and make a speech saying that he doesn't like the result. He cannot do it.
I am just fuzzy. I'm just not remembering the details. I knew it back then. I just don't remember those details now, but I remember that there was reason that plenty of conservatives were hoping that he would do something.
Well, the reason they
And
were
in the
hoping
same-
is because
in
they
the
were hoping
same
that he
way-
would break the law.
in
There
the
was
same
nothing
way
in the
that
law
Ted-
that would allow him to do it.
in the same way that Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and some others spoke up. I mean, the whole thing-
But they do have a legal right. That's the difference. They actually do have the legal right to do it, and they did. Now, I think it was stupid, but they exercised their legal
stupid?
constitutional right.
Not
The
like you
vice
would
president
roll
in the
over.
Senate did not have that right.
Okay, let's just assume, again, I'll look into it. Because like I said, I just don't remember. I didn't realize we were going to be discussing this. But if nothing
You brought
else,
it up.
I know, but if nothing else is an act of civil disobedience, I would have said something.
Okay, fine. We would have had a vice president who is disobeying the Constitution, which he was there to uphold. We
Well,
call
you know
that
what?
insurrection.
You know what also disobeys?
Because, hold on, the
Constitution?
vice
Changing
president does
state
not get to have
election.
civil
No,
disobedience.
they changed state election laws unconstitutionally.
Why do
in
you
order
keep
to
running
break
from the
No,
things that
well,
you're
the
saying?
judges
They
that
were
were
handing out all of these mail-in ballots, and there's never any fraud with mail-in ballots. Oh, come
there's
on.
not.
And
There's
then they
very
were
little fraud
trying
with
to-
mail-in ballots.
Oh no! Please.
The ones that they actually found were for votes for Trump.
Oh, come on, Darren. I mean, look at
It's just because you're drinking the Kool-Aid on this
Kool-Aid.
bullshit that Trump's been spouting for the last 5 or 6 months doesn't actually make
I'm
it
not
true.
drinking the Darren. The fact that we know that they were rigging the election through the courts by
Well, they
changing the
didn't do
election
that.
laws to do what?
They didn't do
Were
that. They
trying
did
to
not
make
rig the elections
elections
through the
more
courts. That is just
honest,
bullshit.
or were they trying to make it rife for fraud?
Just
everything.
so
Yeah,
you know,
nothing you're
guys,
saying is
everything
actually true.
Oh, hang on, just so you guys
to
know,
make
I'm
these-
going to step out because I've got to get back to work. But that said, any member of the audience who is still listening to this, who is crazy enough to be still listening to this, that's on you, guys. But I have no problem with this kind of conversation. I could do it all day, except I gotta work. So that said, Teddy, my great regards for your issues today. I live in fear every day of the same thing happening to me, and so hopefully this you don't take anything in this session of FU in some kind of personal way. People listening, that's an inside joke.
The first kind of a little teaser of FU.
So that said, I'm gonna hit the button. If this ends up knocking you guys off, it's not my intent. I'm going to try to choose the option that doesn't knock you guys off. But I've got to run because I've got to, like I said, I've got to get some work done before the day's over. So thanks so much for sticking around, Darren. I appreciate you being available for these things, Darren. And so carry on by all means.
Bye. Is there,
Assign